across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Great to have you here. As you'll see, I mean, if you're watching with the telly, we're going bare arms. I mean, even with the aircon on full blast, it is still hot. And yet, somehow, most of us, not all of us, sadly, but most of us are going to survive the heat wave. I know, we're just about coping. I don't know how the rest of the world manages it all year round, a lot of them, but there we are. Anyway, there is quite a lot to talk about other than the heat wave. Not that you'd notice that on many other channels. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is, as always, great to have your company. Now, coming up in this hour, Keir Starmer has blasted the BBC. He's demanding an explanation from the corporation after their decision to air Glastonbury act Bob Vylan's vile anti-Semitic hate speech on the weekend. The pro-Palestinian act repeatedly chanted death, death to the IVF. The Conservatives have called for BBC bosses to be prosecuted. Hey, maybe the crowds chanting it might want to question themselves as well. But should it involve criminal charges? Well, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has warned police that if Pascal Robinson Foster, that's the rapper in question, he's not actually called Bobby Vylan of Bob Vylan fame. He says that if he's not arrested, it will be a clear example of two-tier justice, because the incident has drawn inevitable comparisons with the case of Lucy Connolly, still in jailed for 31 months last year for inciting hatred after publishing a vile social media post. But one law for one law for the other. We know how it works, don't we? Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's got enough of his problems of his own. He's going to launch a large attempt to convince MPs to back his cuts for disability benefits. They're not really cuts. They're not really saving much money at all. Disability and welfare bill will carry on going up, but just not by quite as much as before. But he faces a standoff with some 50 or 60 Labour backbenchers who are still set on rebelling, despite about another 60 of them being talked down. Party insiders fear that Starmer's authority has been damaged by the revolt. It follows U-turn after U-turn, including cuts to winter fuel payments and the decision to hold a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. On Friday, it's the anniversary of that huge election victory. But let's face it, within a year, the Prime Minister's authority has entirely gone. We'll be talking about that. Plus, the latest nanny state madness. Supermarkets are going to be ordered to cut up to 100 calories from the average shopping basket under this new drive to tackle obesity. Ministers are set to impose a healthy food standard that will force stores to curtail sales of sugary and salty snacks in favour of more fruit and vegetables. Call me old-fashioned. I think I get to decide what I sodding well buy at the supermarket and not the health secretary Wes Streeting, but I'm old-fashioned like that. Anyway, all that coming up. Plenty more besides, and all of it alongside a wonderful guest, always on a Monday morning, commentator Sam Armstrong. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was very much, as I always do, look forward to seeing you today, because I know that you will have some staunch views on some of the biggest topics today, but not always perhaps the most predictable views, because you are a free speech advocate. You work at the Free Speech Union, among other things, but also you are, I would say, not an absolutist, but you're certainly further down the line than I am in terms of what we think should and should not be allowed to be said. Let's just have a little listen to what happened at Glastonbury over the weekend, because the big fuss was about Kneecap, the Irish rappers. Of course, I'd never heard of any of these people. I'm 57, for goodness sake. I was looking forward to Rod Stewart, who did the deed, by the way. But the biggest concern was about Kneecap and the bit in advance, and Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, saying, look, Kneecap should not be on Glastonbury stage. They certainly should be broadcast by the BBC, given that one of the members has been charged with a serious terrorism crime. Of course, innocent until proven guilty. Various other charges not being brought against the band over some things that are quite clearly on video, which I would say were blatantly questionable at best. But that was where all the concern was. But the warm-up act for Kneecap on one of the stages at Glastonbury, there are many, many different stages, was a punk rapper duo called Bob Vylan. Both of them go by the name of Bobby Vylan, spelt differently. apparently, but actually one of them, we've identified one of them. He went on stage and got a little bit overexcited, but not at all out of character for the sort of stuff that they've been saying and doing over recent years. So let's have a little watch and a listen to what was played out, not just at Glastonbury to many thousands of people, but also on the live stream at the BBC to many hundreds of thousands more. Take a watch and a listen.
Death, death to the IDF, 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 death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
I mean, all credit for the poetry, and the rhyme, but should he, Bobby Villain, as his stage name is, should he face criminal charges for that? Should the BBC, whoever it is who made the decision to allow that to be live streamed, and once that chance had started, did not go click, let's switch to another stage, which is easily what could have been done, should that person or the BBC themselves place charges?
So I draw the line at the point of criminal charges, and I broadly believe that the bar for being jailed, the bar for being hauled before court for something you say is very, very, very high indeed. And I think it is threatening imminent violence. It's the Brandenburg test in America, it's called. And to me, what Lucy Connolly did last summer, what this man did yesterday, neither of those two sets of expressions rise to the level where I want someone criminalising. Do I think it should be broadcast? No. Am I quite delighted that he's already been banned from entering the United States of America?
That's hilarious. I tweeted this so soon after someone's going, well, you can do what you want. Yeah, you can. But I bet you anything his US tour is over.
I think both of those, fantastic.
But that's wait a minute, that's censorship, isn't it? That's you're supposed to be against that.
I think there is a room for editorial taste, and I draw editorial taste that I don't think people should be making vile, nasty, grotesque invitations for people to kill or wishing death upon other people. I don't think people should be able to go on the BBC and say, as they did many times in the years up, they were wishing for the death of Margaret Thatcher, for example. Yeah. I thought that was wrong. Do I think they committed a crime? No, I don't. And
it's a matter of taste rather than
one of the difficulties of being a person like me that tries to be principled and have a set series of values is
whether you agree with what someone's saying.
Whether I agree with or not is when I see a disgusting, frankly cowardly man like Bobby Villain.
Oh yeah, he was the big I am on stage.
Do you know what? Yeah. Do you know what? You think you're brave because you went to a bunch of lefty middle-class kids who know absolutely nothing about this region,
waving their flags,
nothing about anything, and shouted something you knew they were going to agree with. You think that's brave. Let me tell you who's brave. I'll tell you who's brave. The solitary person who went there and flew the flag of the Nova Festival, went into a horde, a sea of people, none of whom agreed with them. And they said, do you know who we should remember? We should remember the 378 boys and girls, and they frankly were boys and girls, that were killed at the Nova Music Festival, a festival just like Glastonbury. Yeah. We should remember the 44 hostages that were kidnapped, and the 10 of whom are still there more than 500 days later. I want to remember them. I want to say that they're just like us coming to a music festival. Yeah. That's bravery. What is not brave is to go up and play to a crowd and to go and, I'm going to push the envelope a little bit further by calling for some people to be killed. Do you know what, Bobby Villain? You wouldn't last 5 minutes with the average IDF soldier.
I was going to say,
would eat you for breakfast,
this is my thing.
mate.
Is actually, what's really brave is a conscripted 18 or 19-year-old young man or woman in Israel defending their nation, defending their families from the threat of annihilation from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from Iran, going into Gaza. Yes, it's a war. It's awful. Yeah, well, yeah, and awful things have happened when British soldiers have been at war as well. War is a terrible, terrible thing. That's why you don't start them by massacring people gratuitously in a bid to start a war, which is exactly what Hamas wanted to do. And they are winning the propaganda war, certainly with those young people, those, frankly, idiots who were there. I've got, close family members who were at the at Glastonbury who said they found it extraordinarily intimidating how sort of, when it's not pro-Palestine, it's anti-Israel and it's anti-Jewish. We've got to call it what it is. This is the latest fashionable thing. It was climate. Climate's a bit boring now. Now this is a bit more edgy, and these guys just think they are so being clever. I mean, here's something else. This is the wonderful thing I thought was wonderful. This guy, Bobby, we're going to keep calling him that. His name's Pascal Double Barrel. So not only did he shout death, death to the IVF, but another song he sang. I say sang. God, I sound like an 85-year-old judge, don't I? But he goes, I'll have to change some of the words. Obviously, heard you want your country back. Shut the F up. You can't have your country back. Now, compare and contrast, will you, his view towards Britain and people wanting their country back and, Palestinians wanting what they believe Palestine. It's never been a state of Palestine, but think Gaza back. Well, you had Gaza back, but then you chose to let Hamas be in charge of it, and that's when it all went wrong. I mean, it's fascinating, these people. They think that borders don't exist and that we should absolutely just accept any entrant from anywhere around the world. Well, but not in the Middle East, where Jews really shouldn't be in certain places because of, national borders by them. And they don't believe in the nation state, except when it's a nation state for Palestine. The confusion, these are muddle heads. They shouldn't be listened to. Where I stand in particular on this is, I'm with you. Here's my thing. If you're going to prosecute Lucy Connolly for her tweet over Southport riots, then you have to prosecute both Kneecap for things they've done and said in the past, although we're told that they are not going to be prosecuted for certain very blatant alleged crimes, but they're not going to be prosecuted because the time delay. I'm not really sure why that should make a difference. But you have to prosecute Bob Villan. You simply have to, because if you're going to say one is a crime and the other isn't, then you have two-tier justice. But we already know that. Now the question is, will he likely? I'm going to guess that police they'll interview, they'll go through the motions, but they'll all try and quietly drop it. And I think we should make sure it's not quietly dropped. I really do. I love the fact that this guy thinks he's the big I am, and I'm now famous, and look at me. And then your 12 night US tour out the window, mate, because they're not so keen on people with those sort of views coming to their country, and your visa's going to be revoked. Should have thought of that first, when you're eating your vegan ice cream at a dairy farm. Let that go. I mean, these people, as I said, these people are muddleheads. But also, crucially, you're in this bizarre situation with the BBC where they have been warned in advance. They know what Kneecap's views are. There's no way in the world they didn't know what Bob Villan's views were. They've been very blatant and open about it. Most basic due diligence about what's going out on air. We know that they had the warning from the Prime Minister. This guy, it was a Kneecap. Those three, they shouldn't have been on stage at Glastonbury. At the very least, they shouldn't be broadcast by the BBC. They went ahead with it. They went ahead with a warm-up act in Bob Villan, who was even more extreme, And that chant, as we just heard, he didn't just say it once and he didn't have a chance to press the button. We've had some senior figures, Danny Cohen, former head of BBC Television, and even someone who used to run Channel 4, who's completely sort of on side with all the lefty views. Even she said, no, you can press the button. There's no way when you've got a live feed of a concert that you wouldn't have another live feed to go to at another stage, which they did. They were being live streamed at the same time. You would literally go, ping, the foot, death to the IVF, ping. Go straight to another feed. That's what you would do. And they made a choice not to do that. That's an editorial judgment. And that editorial judgment was horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. And someone needs to be pulled up for that. And this is the thing. If GB News, if talkTV, Talk Radio, if we had done something similar, if I had a caller on who said stuff like that, say death to Pakistani army or something like that, or death to black people, death to Muslims, or something. By the way, my listeners wouldn't say that because they don't have those views. But if someone did say something like that on my channel or GB News, you think that we wouldn't get prosecuted because we've got what's called a dump button. We've got a button so you can press, so you've got a little bit of a delay. Why would you have Kneecap or Bob Villan on air without a delay so you could press the dump button, so stop it and move live stream? And if it is live, you immediately cut it off. If I then put a caller or a guest back on after they said that, I would be in trouble, and quite rightly. There are rules for broadcasting. I think I think that people have a right to say, I'm going to watch some live streaming on the BBC, the channel I'm forced by law to pay for, of what used to be a fun music festival with a bit of light lefty politics thrown in, and not be subjected to, I mean, I don't like the phrase hate speech, but I think I think that's hate speech in the full meaning of the phrase. I think people have a right to not have to put up with it in the same way that I F and blind in my real life, but I don't want to, my kid to hear the C word and the F word before 9 p.m. on telly. I think people have a right to expect a certain standard, and the BBC has fallen way below that standard. They knew this was likely to happen. They did not prepare for it. When it did happen, they did nothing. I think heads have to roll. Now, some have suggested that Tim Davie, the director of the BBC, is the head that has to roll. Now, having had conversations with a very, very, very senior figure at the BBC a week or so ago, and I talked to that BBC figure about, I thought that the BBC had a serious problem with institutionalised anti-Semitism. That senior figure at the BBC said absolutely not, how that's an outrageous thing for me to have said. It wasn't true, and I pointed out, it's so institutionalised in your organisation, you don't even see it yourselves. Well, here we go. Glastonbury and Bob Vylan and Kneecap are the proof. They don't even see it because those views are normalised at the BBC. And meanwhile, you, me and everyone watching and listening right now is paying their wages. That is not acceptable anymore. That has got to stop. Heads have to roll.
Yeah, and you're right to draw the contrast between the kind of broadcasting that we do here and what they're doing. We, with a tiny but talented team at talkTV, we are held to an exacting standard that if we ever slip, and the guys that sit in the gallery, in the room where they decide what is going out, if they hear the slightest thing, it gets dumped, as you say, and taken off air. The BBC
because that's the rules.
Because those are the rules, and we signed up to play, and that's how you do it.
Yeah.
The BBC would have had dozens, if not hundreds of people making those decisions sat in there. And for them not to have noticed means that people at varying levels of seniority, some paid very large salaries, listened to that, processed it and thought absolutely nothing of it.
Not an issue, and that's the issue.
And that normalisation of the just whole class of staff at the BBC, for whom all of this is normal. And that's where, for years and years, decades now, people have said there is a bias at the BBC that because of the kind of staff they hire, they just can't see. They did an audit 20 years ago. They asked what newspapers are people buying in. And surprise, surprise, there were 3 times as many people buying The Guardian as anything else.
There's more people reading The Guardian at the BBC than read The Guardian.
Yes.
Yep.
But this is it. And for as long as this culture continues to happen, it's going to carry on. So I don't actually want senior heads to roll. What I want is a wholesale change in the kinds of staff so normal people go to work in the BBC.
Normal moral views.
Rather than it being the preserve of a North London elite.
Yeah, well, look, should BBC chiefs face charges over rappers Bob Vylan's death to the IDF chant at Glastonbury? Yes or no? Give us your thoughts at 0344 499 1000. I have to say, you're already getting in on the phone lines. I haven't even read the number out. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1 standard network rate message. I'm going to get to those calls. Just briefly, though, I do want to, because it's actually rather a big story. There's so many. I've got a whole list of things I wanted to talk about in this section, but there's obviously a big one for us. But Keir Starmer's backed down over these welfare reforms. So a £3 billion concession over really, really weak reforms to the welfare state anyway that wouldn't have actually cut the bill by 2030, but would just amend it. It was a tiny bit less than it would otherwise have grown by. It had a rebellion of some 126 Labour backbench MPs, including more than, I think, 10 or 11, 12 committee chairs. Meg Hillier being a former Public Accounts Committee chair, who frankly should know better. I've spoken to her many times on this show. They've kind of backed down over these concessions that basically all these changes won't affect anyone currently claiming. So it's all right if you don't really need it, but you're currently claiming, you just won't be able to get it if you're going to try and claim in the future. That, according to some 60 Labour MPs, isn't enough of a concession, and they may well still vote against the reforms when they come to the Commons tomorrow. That said, Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, she's going to be up in the Commons today with a statement about how they're watering things down. But at the end of the day, Sam Armstrong, we need welfare reform. We can't afford it all. Labour MPs are never going to vote to basically cut benefits for their voters. Keir Starmer has shown he's weak. It's the third major U-turn. We're expecting another couple down the line. At the end of the day, they are not ever going to get on top of the country's finances if they're not willing to upset a few of their constituents.
The guy has got a super majority, the biggest majority of any Prime Minister in recent memory. Yeah. He is not meant to be beholden to his backbenchers, right? Yep. This is precisely what, you know, he is meant to be immune from. This guy lacks so little backbone that he cannot even, he says it's entirely necessary to balance the books. And now he's so scared of his backbenchers, he's having to say, oh no, I was distracted. I was overseas. He
was overseas.
I was travelling to the NATO conference. I didn't really notice the major landmark changes I was making to the entire welfare state. 3 billion quid of public money. Billion, not million.
Oh, he was busy. There was a flag that needed ironing to go behind it.
But I really feel that this is the moment when the curtain is drawn back on the Wizard of Oz premiership that was Keir Starmer. It's over for him now. His backbenchers
hasn't even hit a year yet.
His extreme left-wingers in his party, they know they have got him over the barrel because he's so weak.
Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. More from Sam Armstrong, more from me, lots more from you coming up. Lots of top guests, including Brendan O'Neill from Spike. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel. Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:25 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, Sam Armstrong still with me. Loads more stories I want to get to, including the old nanny state supermarkets and, of course, the heat wave hysteria. I don't know how you're surviving. We've got air conditioning in here, and even that isn't making it any cooler. But somehow, like human beings throughout time, we will survive a couple more days of the heat. I'm not sure that you're all going to die as a result of the world being on fire. But anyway, that's if you're watching BBC and Sky, you may get that impression. Well, Glastonbury was certainly on fire at the weekend, and lots to talk about there, as we've already been discussing. Let's get straight to your messages and your phone calls about whether or not BBC chiefs should face charges over rappers, or should someone lose their job. I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Nancy has got in touch to say yes, they should face charges or release Lucy Connolly. Well, yeah. Tanya says nobody cares about what some group says at Glastonbury. Sick of all the fake right caring more about Israel than Britain. No, it's because I care about Britain that I care about Israel. It's because Israel is in the front line of Western civilization and is a fellow democracy. That's one of the reasons why I care about Israel. And also, by the way, if there wasn't so much horrific anti-Semitism blatantly pushed in this country, then perhaps people who were Jewish wouldn't feel they needed to have a homeland as somewhere safe to go in the event of things getting scarier in Europe. Maybe that's the message for us all. Paul says, should what happened to Lucy Connolly also apply to BBC managers, Glasgow organisers and to the so-called performers? Don't hold your breath. John says the BBC should be a prescribed organisation for decades of crimes against the British people. I quite like that. Bob says no, but they simply have to get rid of the licence fee. And Mark says yes, Bob Villan's performance was a racist incitement to violence and murder, let alone a supporter of a terrorist organisation. This is a worse crime than Lucy Connolly, so why isn't Starmer calling for fast, hard action? Well, let's go to those calls. Jason is in Wiltshire. Jason, what do you want to say?
Morning, Julia. You're right.
Morning. Very well. Hot, but apart from that...
Did we see Dr. HB at Glastonbury at all this weekend? Was she there? Or?
No, funnily enough, my 82-year-old mother was not at Glastonbury this weekend. Another family member was, but there we are. Another family member was working on the bars until 3 a.m. But there you are. Harsh life. Well, now, what do you reckon on this then?
Old Bobby boy. What I'm actually finding a little bit more sort of scary is the fact that how he managed to, I think he's manipulated all these people to start chanting this about the IDF, and I bet you the vast majority of them don't even know what he's on about.
Oh no, they did. There were so many Palestinian flags in that audience. You'd have definitely clocked something was going on. Also, when have you ever been? Well, look, I've been at football matches. I've been at pop concerts. If someone started shouting "death, death to the IDF," I'm pretty sure I'd spot that on the first word.
Yeah, but then again, you're on about people holding Palestinian flags. I could go to a football match, but I might not have a clue what the rules of football are. These people are holding these Free Palestine and all this lot. Again,
well, they're idiots, yeah.
But do they actually know what they're going on about?
No, they largely don't. These are people who think there's a genocide going on in Gaza and they use stupid words. But that's because people like the BBC are telling them that. So my point is that the BBC have engendered these views, they've pushed these views because of institutionalised anti-Semitism, and they don't even realise it, which is why none of them thought there was an issue with that chant.
No, I completely agree with that. But also, where you're obviously all saying the BBC should be prosecuted, which, yes, they should. And I'm saying Sam isn't. I'm glad I don't have a TV licence and I refuse to pay for one and I don't watch live telly. But should the organisation, the organisations of Glastonbury, should they have something against them? Because there must have been somebody watching that. It could have said, right,
pull the feed
on the stage, pull them off.
Well, that's the thing. When they're very clear,
responsible as well.
Yeah, they're broadcasting rules, and you've got a responsibility to not have people, inciting violence at your events. I thought it was pretty basic. Yeah, absolutely, Jason. Thank you very much. I'll send your best to my mum again. I used to be a patient at my mum's, if you don't know that. Ofcom, just been announced, is investigating the BBC after that broadcast from Bob Villan. The watchdog said the BBC clearly has questions to answer over how the performance was shown live on Saturday. This comes after Avon and Somerset Police, the local police force in Glastonbury, launched a review of footage of the set to determine whether any criminal offences were committed. Again, I love that. Like, we can have a look at it. Literally, it takes you, 30 seconds to listen to it. You can tell. You'd know by now, wouldn't you? Seek legal advice. I don't know. Let's go to John, who's in Guildford. Hello, John. What do you want to say?
Yeah, good morning, Julia.
Morning.
Yeah, free speech is not there to protect what me and you like.
Yeah.
It's there to protect what we don't like.
Yeah.
So my thoughts on this rapper, he's probably a pretentious, I nearly said the word turd.
Well, you did say the word turd. I don't think we need to be rude about him. I'd rather we didn't, because I don't think we need to go down to their level.
Okay, so I guess he couldn't give a whatever about the Palestinians. It's typical of these people who tried to get fame.
The latest bandwagon jumping, yeah.
Yeah. So if free speech was there to protect what we like or what the government's like, then you or talkTV or me or the government could end up deciding what we all could hear.
Well, yeah, look, and this is the issue. I don't approve of a lot of, the hate speech, non-crime hate incidents, all of that. However, even in America with the First Amendment, there is a limitation on what you can and can't say. And as Sam Armstrong was pointing out, there is, it's whether it's direct incitement, and also I think there's a likelihood of imminent action based on your words, as in if I said to Sam, I want you to go and get a gun and I want you to go and kill that person out there. That's different from, say, this chant. But do you think the BBC should have broadcast this?
Well, wasn't it live?
No, it's live, but they can pull the feed. Also, a lot of their feeds are delayed by a few. You can delay it. It's a common thing in broadcasting with live broadcast that you have a very short, few seconds delay. If there's any problem with anything, you can just press the button.
Well, yes, I know. If I was to say something now, I know you've got a delay on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's just hurty words as far as I can.
Just hurty words.
Well, but however, we should demand now that Lucy Connolly be released.
Because it's either just hurty words in their case, but it must also be in Lucy Connolly's case. John, thank you very much indeed. 10:32 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online to find out where he stands on this. Do keep your calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:34 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with us. Joined now by Brendan O'Neill. He's a chief political writer at Spiked Online. He's also author of the brilliant book After the Pogrom, 7th of October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilization. Very good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, I mean, are we in a crisis of civilization when a load of nice people at Glastonbury, all on the left, all their little Palestine flags, shout death, death to the IDF?
Yes, absolutely. We have to be really honest about what death to the IDF means. It means death to Jewish soldiers. The IDF is not entirely Jewish, but is predominantly Jewish. We all know that it is charged with protecting the Jewish homeland from the armies of anti-Semites that surround it. So if these people got their way, if their dream that they grossly chanted for at Glastonbury, if that dream were to come true, it would lead to the destruction of the Jewish state and the untold death of Jewish people. And some of them will say, well, we didn't know that, we weren't thinking about that. Well, to borrow a phrase they like to use, educate yourselves, learn about what this means. And I think it's horrific. I think it's genuinely horrific. To me, it felt like a fascist rally. We haven't seen anything like this since the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s, when you have a group of privileged kids in a field chanting for the death of the army of the Jewish nation. That's something that we've got to take very seriously.
I thought it was very interesting. One of his other chants that was, again, I do sound like an elderly judge when I read this out like this, but heard you want your country back, shut the F up, you can't have your country back. I thought what an interesting comparison, as a compare and contrast with their views over Palestine and their views over the nation state they believe the Palestinian people are entitled to. but apparently not that keen on it when it comes to Britain.
Absolutely. You know, the Palestinians can have a state, which, by the way, is a view that many of us share. But the Jews can't have a homeland. Oh, no, absolutely not. Us Brits can't have our country back, as they put it. You know, that when he said that, it really summed up just how bourgeois and smug Glastonbury has become. Because who is that aimed at? That's aimed at reform voters.
Yeah.
That's aimed at the largely working class people who have been betrayed time after time by the Labour Party, who are looked down upon with utter contempt by the media establishment, who are viewed as gammon, as the scum of the earth, as obese and lazy and feckless and Europhobic and xenophobic. It's that class of people that he is looking down upon as well. So this wasn't rock and roll rebellion. No. This was snobbery dressed up as punk.
But it was hilarious, wasn't it? You even had, you know, the big upset was going to be about Kneecap. Then you've got Jade from Little Mix, for goodness sake, who, by the way, many years ago blocked me on Twitter when I did suggest they put their clothes back on at some point, given that all their fans are 12-year-old girls. But she went on stage and she was saying, yeah, join me in a chant. You know, it was F, you know, F smelly toilets, F reform, F, you know, genocide. I mean, it was so trite and embarrassing. And then calls for people to boycott Rod Stewart as the headliner of Sunday Tea Time Act because he'd said that he'd give reform a chance. And it was like, that crowd was absolutely packed out and everyone was having a wonderful time. Far more people chanting, I have to say, you know, I am sailing. And if you think you're sexy, than they were death to the IDF. What about the people who would say to you, as John just said, who's a caller, you know, these are hurty words. They're not nice words. They come from a position of hate. I don't want to hear them, but people have a right to say them. No one should be prosecuted for saying them. No one should be prosecuted for broadcasting them. Lots of calls for the BBC chief to face prosecution. Ofcom even shouldn't be censuring people exercising their right to freedom of speech. What would you say to that?
You know, I agree with all of that. My question is why it doesn't apply equally to everyone. That's the underlying question here. I'm a free speech absolutist. So even though I thought Bob Vylan behaved awfully, and even though I think it was an incredibly bigoted, fascistic cry, and I'm disgusted by the audience that joined in with it, I still wouldn't want to see prosecutions. I do think we have to defend freedom of speech, even when it's speech that we find really ugly and really horrible.
But it was incitement to violence. There's a difference, is there not? And you can say, even in America, the law is new. There has to be, their threshold is much, much higher than any threshold we've ever had in law here. But there must be a threshold in terms of you can't incite people to violence. Is your argument that he wasn't actually expecting people in that audience to put their Palestinian flags down, get on a plane straight from Glasgow and head over to try and kill IDF soldiers? Is that so? It's not really incitement. But then did people really think that people might see Lucy Connolly's tweet that was up for a few hours last July and they would suddenly decide, yeah, you know what, I think I will go and set fire to an asylum hotel?
Exactly right. You know, I don't think what he did was, strictly speaking, incitement, because it didn't have that imminent nature to it. I don't think there was an imminent prospect of any of those people in the audience who were probably off their heads on drugs or drink or something else, that they were going to look for an IDF soldier to take out. And by the way, good luck to them if they even thought they could do that. But so I don't think it was an imminent act of incitement. But you're absolutely right. The same can be said for Lucy Connolly. The idea that anyone saw her briefly lived post, which she herself regretted and which everyone agrees was obnoxious, the idea that anyone saw that and acted on it is preposterous. So my solution to our undoubted system of two-tier justice is not to jail everyone who says awful things, but to not jail anyone who says awful things. And at the moment, in Keir Starmer's Britain, it seems you can say things that are in line with the fashionable politics, but you can't say things like Lucy Connolly said. So that is an unequal system.
Wouldn't we just rather that neither of them said those things? I mean, again, I think people should be able to reserve the right, especially when they're forced by law to pay the BBC licence fee. I think people should be entitled to watch a live stream or recording of a pop act, you know, a rap act, I mean, punk rapper, whatever the hell they think they are, at a music festival and not be subjected to violent political chants. Is that unreasonable? I mean, I like, people carrying their Palestinian flag. Again, my favourite flag, and it's there every year at Glasgow, is a big flag, which always at the pyramid stage, with blocking your view since 2002. And it makes me chuckle every single year. But can't we, surely the thing that I think most people in this country would be united by would be a view that, could we please have music and sport without politics? No armbands, no rainbow laces, no Palestinian flags, no lectures, no death chants. Could we just be allowed to have a little bit of fun, or a little bit of sport, a little bit of music, without being sodding well lectured every time?
Lectured and looked down upon and regaled with these obnoxious neo-fascistic chants for the death of Jewish soldiers. Absolutely. If only we could live in that world. I think there are definitely questions for the BBC to answer, because as I was saying earlier, the seriousness of this cannot be overstated, which is that this was a borderline, violent, almost fascist rally. That's what it felt like, a mob of people crying for death to the army of the Jewish nation, and the BBC broadcast it live into millions of homes. That is an incredibly serious matter. So anyone who just brushes this aside and says, it's all about free speech, I love free speech, but that's not enough. We do have to talk about how this happened and what's going on.
But look, we know this is the latest, interest of the people on, the woke left. They've moved on a bit from the whole eco thing. And of course, all those people who are obsessed with the eco thing will all have had their plastic bottles. They'll have left their disposable tents there. They care not a jot when they left this morning. It's all a load of a performative nonsense anyway. But, the Palestine cause is now the latest, Gaza, the latest big, fad. The BBC, though, has got a lot of highly paid executives, paid for by you and me, although not by, I think, was it John, who doesn't pay his licence fee, who just called in. Increasingly, a lot of people don't, because they're so angry about some of the coverage. But they have a duty of, of care, of responsibility in the same way. Ofcom is in charge of all broadcasters. We know that Ofcom is now going to be investigating the BBC over this. Senior executives, there was the warning over kneecap. The Prime Minister weighed in on it. He shouldn't be performing, shouldn't be broadcast live. Decided not to broadcast that live, but they put this act on, Bob Villan on live, even though they knew. Anyone who said, let's put Bob Villan on a live broadcast, they would have known the singer's views. They would have known where they stood. They would have known about the language and everything. So they chose to do that. When the first death to the IDF was shouted, they chose not to cut the feed and go to another one of the many, there are like 7 or 8 stages now they were taking live feeds from. They chose not to do that. Those are editorial decisions. Do you agree with me that part of the reason why the editorial decision was not made to cut that feed was because the BBC is institutionally anti-Semitic? They don't see it, they don't hear it. It is so ingrained in their thinking as an institution, they don't even realise. So when I questioned a very, very senior BBC executive about this and challenged him a week or so ago, he was genuinely, I think, morally outraged that I should have questioned this stance of the BBC and denied it. I was outrageous for me to say it. And I said, you're all so ingrained with it, you don't even know you're doing it. Do you think that's an issue?
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think that is the reason they didn't press the off button, which they would have done if it had been any other kind of offensive chant. Imagine someone was chanting, trans women are men or something. They would be like, oh my God, let's switch it off. So yes, I think that's why. And you know what? The fact that they're so defensive when people like you and others call out the anti-Semitism that exists there, that in itself is interesting, because it's all the rage these days for institutions to admit that they have a problem with racism, to admit that they're too white, they're too male, pale, stale, that we don't treat ethnic minorities well enough. And they love to self-flagellate over their own failings on the race question. But when you mention the fact that they might be anti-Semitic, they hunker down. They say, no way, you're wrong. The defensiveness gives them away. The double standard gives them away. But you know what, Julia? Yesterday in Gaza, a young British lad was killed. A guy called Yisrael Nathan Rosenfeld. He was 20 years old. He was in the IDF. He was killed by Hamas, that army of anti-Semites that wants to destroy the Jewish state. Just think about this. In Glastonbury, a field of people, privileged kids, were shouting death to the IDF at the exact same time. You know who else was either saying that or thinking it? Hamas. and they killed this young British lad. So tell me, who's the real anti-fascist there? Those idiots at Glastonbury, or that brave hero who went into Gaza to fight for his country? I think I know the answer to that question.
Absolutely. Just finally, look, the Prime Minister weighed in on this. He's weighing in. He's finally got back from all his foreign jaunts and weighing in on the welfare reform debate. He says he regrets, various things he said about like us being an island of strangers. He's had the U-turn on. I mean, the U-turns are just non-stop, aren't they? We had the winter fuel allowance U-turn. That was a good thing. Rape gangs inquiry U-turn. Now the disability benefits U-turn. There may even be more coming. Two-child benefit cap. You name it. Probably going to have a U-turn on the tax pledge. He's going to get taxes in the autumn as well. This is the Prime Minister not even finishing his first year in office. That'll be on Saturday, the anniversary of him becoming Prime Minister, and he's already lost all authority. Do you think he lasts till the end of his term?
I think he won't, and I really hope he won't. What a pathetic excuse for a Prime Minister. Think back to the lady is not for turning. Now, people might be pro-Thatcher or anti-Thatcher. That's their business. But she knew how to stand her ground. You can't have a Prime Minister he's not even a weather vane. It's an insult to weather vanes to call it the weather vane. This is the guy who will just put all his so-called principles on the bonfire if he thinks it will help him keep his position in number 10. He's a coward, and it's institutional cowardice with him, and it just means that he's a really bad leader, and the country deserves better.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online. Always good to talk to you. Thank you so much. Brief word from Sam Armstrong.
Yeah, this Prime Minister is just the weakest of any I can remember in so long. It's spineless. It's jelly-like. It's supine. There is nothing there to him whatsoever. And you kind of got a question, really. What is the point? Because actually, it is quite difficult to be Prime Minister in a number of ways. It's a horrible job. Your life is poured over. He's obviously had a family member being attacked. Inordinate pressures. You're constantly switched on. I totally get why you would do that if you actually want to achieve something, if you actually want to get something done. But if you don't care, if you're just as happy to cut this or not cut it,
you just want to be PM.
I really, really don't understand people like that.
No, absolutely. Again, I just don't think he has a single. I don't think that he's sort of morally waving in the wind. I don't think he's ever had any views at all that he wouldn't sell, for one more vote in Parliament. 10:48 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that conversation. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Up next, we're going to be talking about the latest nanny state madness. Wes Street and the Health Secretary. Honestly, I thought he was quite sane, following on the usual sort of Tory madness we've seen. Basically, going to force supermarkets to basically change what we put into our supermarket trolleys and baskets, so we'll lose on average 100 calories a week. This is utter madness. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
You've got members of the Israeli government, like Ben Motrick and Ben Gavir, talking about the Palestinians as animals. So, if
you say death to the IDF, that's a lot worse.
No independent journalist can get into Gaza, and they can't report on what's happening. Now, Israel is also under attack. It's a complicated situation in which a pop group, which doesn't know much about it, has got involved. Let us be very careful not to overblow this. Let us be very careful also to be aware that different sides will be using it for propaganda purposes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. We're going to leave the chance of death to the IDF just for a brief moment and talk about how we all must get ourselves much healthier. This is what Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, says. Huge cost to the NHS, we are told, from basically, everybody being obese, except everybody isn't obese. More people are overweight and more people are obese. And that does bring health problems. A lot of those end up being dealt with by the NHS and paid for by everybody's taxes. But is the answer, well, to tell us all what we should or should not eat, because supermarkets are going to be ordered to cut up to 100 calories from the average shopping basket under new nanny state drive to tackle obesity. Ministers, we're told, are set to impose a healthy food standard that will force your local supermarket to curtail sales of sugary snacks and salty snacks in favour of us eating more fruit and vegetables. So they can do special offers, they can move things around in the store, but basically they're going to have to submit how much of basically certain sort of more unhealthy food and more healthy food that they have sold, and show that they've done their bit to cut us down to size. Is it the job of my local Waitrose or local Tesco to tell me what I should or should not eat and put in my basket? Let's talk about this with Chris Snowdon. He's the head of lifestyle economics at the Institute for Economic Affairs. A very good morning to you, Chris.
Morning, Julia.
I have to say, I mean, this stuff just gets madder and madder every single time. You've been writing and talking about these issues for a long time. And this stuff, by the way, it's not Labour. This stuff has been going on well through the last few Tory governments as well. How does what a supermarket does affect what I choose to put into my trolley or my basket when I'm in the supermarket?
That's a very good question. I mean, this is an extension, really, of an idea that's very popular amongst public health academics and left-wingers in general, which is that people don't really have any agency, and what we consume is dictated to us by companies. They hugely overestimate the power of businesses to make us do things, the power of advertising, the power of promotions. Obviously, these things do have an effect on the margin, but for fruit and veg is already very heavily promoted in the sense that most supermarkets have it as soon as you go in. They want you to see.
And it's very cheap.
And it's incredibly cheap. I think I got some carrots, 2 kilos of carrots for 15p the other day. I mean, then pretty much give it away. It's hard to see where the profit margin is on a lot of the fruit and veg, but frankly, you'd have to pay me to buy some vegetables, and even then, I just take them home and throw them away. So the issue here isn't price or promotion. People go on about buy one, get one free. Actually, there's not that many offers like buy one, get one free. The supermarket model these days generally is consistently low prices across the board.
Well, exactly. I have to say the buy one, get one free is in my local supermarket. They always seem to be for tangerines. I don't need 24 tangerines. No one needs 24 tangerines. I've actually stood there and gone, isn't it the free offer? I've said to someone behind me, would you like my second set of tangerines? Because there's no way in the world my family of 3 is going to get through this many before they're going off. But this is the thing. It's this idea that where things are on the shelves is going to dictate what we buy. I mean, I shop like a ninja. I'm not going to lie. I've got my list. I race through a store. I will buy what I'm going to buy. And whether I choose to buy a chocolate cake or not buy a chocolate cake is entirely down to me. Now, I'll be told by the advertisers, oh, you think it is. You think it's down to you, but actually you're getting all these subliminal messages. And that's what's forcing you to buy the unhealthy food. So if supermarkets place it somewhere differently, they don't sort of try and promote those sorts of foods, you'll buy less of it. Is there any evidence that that is true?
End of our promotions do work to some extent. They will remind you, oh, batteries, I need some batteries. I get them or whatever, right? Shoelaces and things like this. Sometimes a new product will be launched and that's a good place to let people know about it. But it's really difficult to launch new food products because, like you say, most people just go in the supermarket, they buy the same stuff they've always bought, give or take. So the supermarkets are being set up to fail with this. They're being told to somehow take 100 calories out of the average shopping basket, and they don't have the power to do it. The end of our promotions have already been banned for so-called junk food, as it has at the entrance and the exit of supermarkets. So that's already been dealt with, and I doubt that's made any difference either. The supermarkets will go along with this because they kick the can down the road, but the long-term effect will be after however long, 3 or 4 years, they evaluate this. We say this is not good enough. We need to go harder. And the next health secretary will say we need to have regulation now.
Of course they will. But also any figures that we get will always be based on this is, yes, people have got fatter, even though we've had this promotion. But look how much fatter they would have got if we hadn't had this promotion, because that's what they always do, don't they? These sort of completely made up figures, they think. But this has been the issue with the minimum pricing for alcohol in Scotland as well, isn't it? We're often told, well, yeah, people have bought more booze, but they would have bought a lot more if we didn't have minimum pricing for alcohol. I mean, they could just claim anything they want.
They can, yeah, assuming that they want to show that the policy has worked. But I think with this particular policy, public health academics want to show that it hasn't worked, because that would then justify taxes and regulation. You've got to remember, at the moment, Wes Streeting on Twitter is promoting this idea as being really liberal. He said, we're not doing any meddling, we're not having nanny, this is just a nudge. It's not, but it's less coercive than what a lot of campaigners do.
But here's the thing. This is all based on this premise, and it's the same with the alcohol, and it's the same with food, and fizzy drinks, high cal food and the like, takeaways. So there's this idea that if you can, it's a theory, isn't it? If you can cut the average consumption of the average person, that in some way is going to mean that the people who are alcoholics or the people who are obese will also be included in that, and everybody will just eat a bit less or drink a bit less, and that will therefore help the obese. But why don't they just tackle the obese? I mean, one suggestion I've always heard is that, the biscuit aisle, the crisp aisle, you have a turnstile, and if you can't fit through that turnstile, you don't get to buy that stuff. That would work better, wouldn't it?
It probably actually would, yeah. But I mean,
if you want something that might work.
The idea that everybody should consume a certain amount less is absolutely at the root of this, and they've done some modelling saying however many, I can't remember, 350,000 people will stop being obese if they consume 50 fewer calories and so on. There is actually an interesting point to this, which I did some research on a couple of years ago. If you actually did this successfully, if you actually managed to get everybody to consume a set number of calories fewer, which is how it's supposed to work with reformulation and the supermarket plan, you would actually end up with quite a significant rise in the number of children in particular who will be undernourished. Yeah. And that's actually more of a serious health issue for children than being overweight or obese.
Absolutely. But also, I mean, this cutting up to 100 calories from the average shopping basket. I mean, 100 calories isn't even a slice of toast before you've put butter or marge on it. That's how little that is.
Yeah, but the like silly computer models will say, yeah, it doesn't seem very much, and that's the point. All we need to do is just nudge people a little bit this way. But it doesn't work. People who are obese are eating way more than 100 calories too many a day, and they're probably the least likely to be affected by policies like this. It's the same old story.
They will make the effort to walk down the aisle to get the cake.
Yes.
As indeed will I. Once this comes in, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to deliberately consume more calories. Sodom. Chris Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle Economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you so much. Sam Armstrong.
Wes Streeting seems to be doing a couple of things to show he's very left-wing at the moment, criticising Israel, doing this. It's almost as if he senses there might soon be a vacancy for
But the polling shows
he's
he's a popular figure among non-Labour Party members.
Yeah.
But among Labour Party members, you've got to, as Keir Starmer knew, pretend to be very lefty.
And voila!
Because guess what? Labour Party members will always vote for the Socialist. Yeah, I know. But again, if he's going to do stuff like this, then, well, there we are. So much more to talk about, guys. More from Sam Armstrong, lots more top guests. Going to get more of you as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This show is as hot as the air outside, but we have air conditioning here, which does seem to have finally kicked in. Don't be jealous, but if you want to just come into the office, come and just crowd in. I'm sure Ian Collins won't mind. We'll all just sort of like just stay in the studio for the rest of the day. It is sweltering, but don't worry. We will cope and survive through it, although we are going to be talking about heatwave hysteria in the media in a few moments' time. But welcome to the show. Welcome back if you've been listening already, listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker or watching on YouTube or your connected device. One thing you can be sure of is that we won't be shouting death chants to any foreign national army because, you know, we don't feel it necessary. But Keir Starmer has blasted the BBC and he's demanding an explanation from the corporation whose fees of all the management we pay after the decision to air Glastonbury act Bob Villan's vile anti-Semitic hate speech at the weekend, the pro-Palestinian act, very blatantly, you know, had these views before he was put on air, repeatedly shouted death to the IDF. Now, the Conservatives have called for BBC bosses to be prosecuted, as well as investigation by the police of the punk rap duo Bob Villan. Now, Ofcom is investigating the BBC over their decision to allow this to be broadcast. The BBC Ofcom have said they are very concerned. While the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp has also warned police that if Pascal Robinson Foster, for that is the name of the rapper singing half of the duo, is not arrested, it would be a clear example of two-tier justice. After all, Lucy Connolly, still behind bars. I think she's released later this month, serving a 31-month sentence for inciting hatred after a social media post on X. Why would she be prosecuted and jailed, but not these rappers? We're also going to be talking about the welfare reform. Keir Starmer launching a last-ditch attempt to convince MPs to back his rather pathetic, already now watered-down cuts to disability benefits. And in the latest transit madness, media regulator Ofcom has told broadcasters that it must give airtime to claims that biological men are women when covering trans issues. Because although climate science apparently is a settled matter, genuinely, that's what Ofcom think in their official documentation. It is not a settled matter, that biological sex is very clear between men and women, and the Supreme Court judgment making that even more clear in law. Guys, if you want to have a clue of what we have to deal with as broadcasters, there you are. That's where we are with Ofcom. They're the people who get to say whether or not we're on air and what I can and cannot say. I kid you not, that's how insane they are. Simple as that. Right, loads more to talk about. Joining me for the chatsters, commentator Sam Armstrong. Never short of an opinion. I'd love to hear yours as well. Lots of calls on the board. We're going to get to as many as we can. Asking you about Bobby Villan's death to the IDF chant at Glastonbury. Should BBC chiefs face charges over what the rappers had to say? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Sam Armstrong, I put this question to you earlier. You know, should BBC chiefs face charges? You're very clear they shouldn't face charges. You don't even think the rapper should face charges. What do you make of Ofcom saying they are very concerned by the incident and the decision of the BBC to choose to live stream Bob Villan's performance, to not basically press the off button the moment he started shouting death to the IDF, and their defence, and a decision to also, you know, broadcast kneecap as well when one of the members is charged under the Terrorism Act?
Well, I always try and be consistent, and it's not easy because I look at this man and of course I want him locking up, I want him jailing and all the rest of it.
Do you?
I want in my heart, but I know that the principal position we've got to start with is that we don't jail people for saying things that we disagree with, however offensive, however wrong, unless there is an imminent threat of violence. That is the standard I apply to people that I have some sympathy with, and it's the standard I have to apply to people.
And yeah, I don't have to agree with what someone says, but look, people who've just tuned in, let's play the clip of what this is Bobby with a Y, Bobby Villan, who's one half, the singing half of the duo Bob Villan. I know, it's tedious, isn't it? This is what he had to say on stage at Glastonbury to thousands of people in the audience, not just in the crowd, but also live streaming it on the BBC iPlayer, but also was broadcast by choice by the BBC. This is what he had to say.
Death, death to the IDF, 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 death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
For me, it's the inshallah. It's the, oh, I'm just so down with the kids, isn't it? What do you make of that then? That's what we're talking about. Is that just someone exercising their free speech, Sam?
Well, it's pathetic cowardice, right? To shout to a privileged, overprivileged, left-wing crowd, all of whom agree with you.
380 quid a ticket, basically.
And to think you're so cool. Look, do you know who I think? I'll tell you what. Bob Villan. I tell you who, if you can say that to, I think you're courageous. Not just an IDF soldier who, as I say, would eat you up for breakfast, but a couple of years ago we had Noah Kalish on this show, who was a girl that went to a music concert at the Nova Festival, and she sat next to me no further than 3 feet away, in which she described how she cowered and hid under a bush while her friends were murdered and butchered around her. If you can go to she was at a music festival. She likes listening to music.
It was a music peace festival as well.
If you can go and say and shout that at her, if you can sit there and listen to her story, then I think you're courageous. Then I think you've got something to say. You haven't, you won't. You live in a little bubble that you have created in which everyone agrees with you, in which you're getting patted on the back by a bunch of other know-nothing, idiotic cowards like yourself, pat each other on the back, talking about things about which you know absolutely nothing. Yep. You are an idiot, you are a fool, and it pains me that I have to defend you against the criminal charges. However, the BBC are a national broadcaster. They're in an extraordinary privileged position in which we are forced, at pain of imprisonment, to pay the money for them, whether or not we want to watch them or not. And that comes with responsibility. And that responsibility extends, in my opinion, to not broadcasting death threats, death chants about an allied nation's army. They knew what was happening. They should have dealt with it. They didn't. And the BBC, I don't want more just a rap on the knuckle. If heads don't roll, something has gone very badly wrong. Well, this is the thing.
And again, when were there chants against, death to, Assyrian forces from Assad when they were killing people? What about, death to the Iranian forces killing people? I mean, it's amazing. It's, again, keeps coming back to it. It's always when it comes to Israel. What is it that's different about Israel? Oh, this unique genocide in Gaza. There isn't genocide in Gaza. There's a war being waged in Gaza. The only reason why civilians, including children, are dying in Gaza is because of Hamas's actions using babies, children, women, innocent men as a human shield. The BBC has just in the last few moments issued a statement, the BBC spokesperson saying that the BBC should have pulled the live stream of Bob Villan's performance during Glastonbury. They said it contained utterly unacceptable and anti-Semitic sentiments, because again, it wasn't just the death to the IDF. There was also a long story all about Zionists. The word Zionist is always spat out. When people do it like that, they are talking about Jewish people. That's what they mean. They just think they can get away with it. And the BBC has said they regret not putting a live feed. Now, here's the thing. If it was the wrong decision to allow it to happen, the idea that after the Prime Minister's made a statement, before these performances even started, before Glastonbury even kicked off proper on Friday, the idea that senior management of the BBC were not involved in decisions about what was and what was not going to be live streamed, and whether there would be a delay, and whether anybody was going to be in charge of okay, we'll put kneecap on. That was going to be the big fuss, wasn't it? And we'll put this Bob Villan duo on. But I need someone literally with their finger over the button to go click. We'll go to another live stream. Now, Danny Kern, the former director of BBC Television, he said, look, sorry, you literally, there's no way you'd ever not have someone with their finger hovering over that button ready. The first death to the... Put your finger on that button. Now, people might be used to the fact that someone's going to swear a lot. He also said, heard you want your country back. Shut the F up. You can't have your country back. And again, I compare and contrast. Well, why don't you say that to the Palestinians? I mean, happy to say that to British people. And by the way, I hate to tell you, you are British, mate. Really sorry, you are British, the singer. It is extraordinary, the double standard. But should heads roll at the BBC? Because at the end of the day, Ofcom have said that they're going to investigate. They are very concerned. The BBC admitted it was a mistake. They regret making that mistake. They accept these were anti-Semitic sentiments. Here, my argument, the point I made to a senior figure at the BBC just a week or so ago is that the BBC is now so institutionally anti-Semitic that they cannot make the right judgments. They don't realise that their Today programme in the morning and the coverage that they give of what's going on in Gaza, things like that, they're not holding different parties to the same moral standards. They don't see it, they don't hear it, because they are imbued with it. It is ripe throughout the entire culture of the BBC, The Guardian and elsewhere. Through the Labour Party as well. They're riven with this. They don't see it, so they can't cut it out because they are part of the problem. Do their heads have to roll, and how senior should they be?
Well, everybody from the person whose finger was hovering or supposed to be hovering over that button, all through that gallery, and I don't believe for a moment that there weren't senior executives in that production studio.
Yeah, the whole of the BBC goes down there,
waiting and ready to deal with it. Every single person involved needs to be immediately terminated for gross misconduct. The BBC say it was wrong. They say it breached their guidelines. There were people sent down there with no job other than to enforce those guidelines and to make sure that they were upheld. They had a very nice hotel. They had tickets to Glastonbury. They were paid.
The BBC spends millions on Glastonbury.
They were paid on our dime. They utterly failed to turn up and do their job. The one thing they were sent there to do, they didn't do. Yep. Those people, and actually it's not just I don't just want the Director General of the BBC to resign or to be sacked or the rest of it. We've had that before and it hasn't made a difference. Actually, it's the individual producers, it's the individual editorial directors that stood there, didn't do their job while they were paid to do it. If that happened in any other workplace, if there's a crash at a delivery yard because somebody wasn't doing their job, wasn't raising a barrier or doing the rest of it, they'd be sacked. And everybody in this country works to that standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than the BBC and the civil service.
And people on, again, multi-100,000-pound salaries as well. And again, thinking they're so morally superior to the rest of us. And again, I think the Lucy Connolly comparison really bears, again, she's not the poster girl. What she wrote was a horrible tweet. Lots has come out about her since, but she's still in jail. Mother of one. no previous, nothing at all. Deleted the tweet, regretted the tweet. And she's behind bars. I wish she hadn't pleaded guilty. I wish that she'd come to the Free Speech Union. Anyone should go to Free Speech Union to get advice before doing anything like that. Shouldn't have written that tweet. Absolutely foul and vile. I'm horrified she had that thought about, go and set fire to asylum hotels if I care. I would say quite clearly what Bob Villan, these rappers, saying was far more of an incitement to direct violence than anything Lucy Connolly wrote. And it was broadcast to 30,000 people in the crowd at this particular stage and to probably 100,000 plus on BBC live streaming. It seems to me to be much clearer. If you're going to prosecute one, you've got to prosecute the other, or you free the person you've already prosecuted. We cannot have it both ways. This two-tier justice is untenable to continue with.
Yeah, absolutely, categorically right. And let's remember, in Lucy Connolly's case, there's a daughter that's done absolutely nothing wrong, that has been without a mother now for almost a year, and she's going to be without a mother for a few months yet. And actually, it's not just Bob Villan, of course, or this ridiculous figure who was born in Ipswich. He's from Suffolk. I mean, he's from Suffolk with a double-barrelled name.
In the Ipswich ghetto.
Just pause the other one, honestly.
It's got a double-barrelled name.
It's not just him. There was a horde of people, all of whom have got double-barrelled names, stood out in that crowd.
Nothing wrong with a double-barrelled name.
Stood out with in that crowd, and there will be BBC cameras that recorded each and every one of them.
They were chanting away,
and they were chanting along with him. Each and every one of them thought it was cool to shout death to people they've never met, had no idea about. And look, I don't want any of them prosecuted, but if that's the standard in our country,
then so be it.
Then they can all go. They can all go, and that will be hundreds, if not thousands, of people who joined in that charge.
It's either hate speech or it's not hate speech. Right. But if I tell you what, though, you know what would have really made them very upset at Ofcom and everyone else, if this guy Bobby Villan of Bob Villan, the rap duo, if he'd misgendered anybody, I tell you what, then that would have been a step too far. But no, but that's the territory we're in. Look, let's talk about something else, because I do want to hear your thoughts. I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's talk about Keir Starmer, because he got involved in this. He's made statements about this, and I think quite rightly. But again, no one believes a word he says. No one trusts a word he says, because his word is not. I mean, for a man whose word is his bond. I mean, basically anything that Keir Starmer says, it's going to be the opposite within a day or a week. We've got a Prime Minister who, on Friday, is the anniversary of that election last year. We have this sweeping landslide, but let's be honest, it was a landslide defeat of the Tories rather than a landslide victory for Labour. He's already, with a working majority of 156 in the House of Commons, he's already got no authority left. He'd had a U-turn over winter fuel allowance payments, but that was a good one. He should have U-turned on that, but he shouldn't have made a mistake in the first place. U-turn on whether or not there should be a public inquiry, national inquiry into rape gangs. U-turn on that because of being forced into it. U-turn now on disability benefits. Many expect there'll be a U-turn on his previous statements about the two-child benefit cap, and he's going to drop that, whereas before he said he wouldn't. We had 126 MPs last week who were saying, we are going to vote against your welfare reforms. We believe they're too harsh. Already we've seen a backing down, and the back down is 3 billion quid's worth of. So the idea is we're going to limit disability PIP payments, personal independence payments, to people who are disabled. And the idea is, that there are too many people getting these payments and they don't need them, because clearly there are too many people getting these payments and they don't need them. We're off the scale compared to any other country in terms of these sort of payments. But Labour MPs have forced him into a climb down where we're looking at anyone who's already on these payments. We've had a massive increase, millions in the last year. 1,000 more a day claiming these benefits. But it will apply to people who subsequently get onto these benefits. Already we've got a black hole in the finances, but we are looking at yet another climb down, yet another U-turn. He says he was busy on dealing with foreign trips and that he wasn't paying close attention. He also regrets saying the island of strangers comment in the speech, because he said again he hadn't read the speech properly. This is a man who isn't in control of what he says, what policy the government pushes through, his backbenchers, his government. This is a Prime Minister 1 year into office with a massive majority, a huge landslide, with no authority.
Is it any wonder then that after a year in office, he is the most unpopular Prime Minister in British political history? The public didn't really vote him in the first place, right? This was a loveless landslide. He came into office with this huge result with just 34% of the public support, much less than, for example, Michael Howard lost an election with in 2005. And that's the very curious thing, which is that he came in here. We're beginning to see just how little support he has. And what he's done is now invite open season on him, because his Labour Party is the Labour Party that was built largely by Jeremy Corbyn. The Labour members, the Labour MPs came up through the ranks of Jeremy Corbyn. They were all happy to participate in that. They were all far to the left, right? And now he has just put a big sign over Downing Street that says, John McDonnell, extremists of left, come to me with your crazed claims, your crazed shopping list of ideas. And this government, heaven forbid, is about to get even worse. And we've only done 1 year. He could be here for 5. We are 20% of the way through.
So bad. A lot of people saying they don't think he's going to survive. And Angela Rayner's, sources talking to the papers at the weekend, talking about how.
No.
Well, you mentioned earlier, Wes Street and the Health Secretary clearly on manoeuvres with his sort of, I mean, I thought, and I really like Wes Streeting as a person, but genuinely, I thought it was outrageous. His whataboutery when he mentioned West Bank settlements, the Israeli ambassador, complaining about what happened at Glastonbury, and then sort of, oh well, they should get their own house in order. Mate, that was not the correct response. But there's clearly a little bit of vying. They think there's going to be a job vacancy very soon. Yeah,
they're beginning to make the Tory party look like a united, put together, plotting free.
I know. That's something, isn't
entity,
it? But again, talk about, is he going to lose another chief of staff on the infighting? And again, moving to the left, moving to the right, and that pull. We see that in the Tory party. We see, chaos sometimes in reform and losing people. Zee Youssef resigned, then Rupert Lowe out. it's happening everywhere. Do you know what I like it though? Politicians are a little bit scared of the voters now, which is quite nice, and I think they always should be. And I don't mean physically, I mean scared of our votes and how they're moving them around. Another big issue, of course, that is still always going to be a big issue is channel migrants. We had him in the studio the other day, Thomas Godfrey, who's a reporter at The Sun, who exposed this extraordinary situation with delivery riders from work, illegal migrants literally arriving, being put in a hostel, signing up within hours, and then going out to work as on a bicycle to be a delivery rider for Deliveroo, Uber Eats and Just Eat, and basically big crackdown. Now the Home Office is calling in the bosses, well not bosses, but senior figures in those three organisations to give them a little finger wagging in the Home Office today over some tea and biscuits over the crackdown. But they said they were going to crack down, the police would get involved. But this reporter has posed in 2 or 3 different places as a channel migrant, and literally arriving and saying, "Hi, I'm not allowed to work, but can I get onto this?" Literally, so you basically hire the log on of somebody who's got a licence, or someone who's already been approved for 40 quid for the week, and then you arrive for the week, you make a few £100, and then you hand it back to the guy who gave it to you. I mean, and this is absolutely rife. And this is a reporter who's able to literally turn up, and within minutes he can do this. This stuff is rife. No one's doing anything about it. And by the way, no one will do anything about it.
Yeah, and look, these companies have been hauled in. I can remember this story being written about 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years. It's one of those where it periodically comes up. It's not big enough news that everyone can remember it's already happened. But I do think there's a really big problem with big companies, with corporate types that are doing very, very well, who all, by the way, have just finished Pride Month of having displayed how woke they are and how virtuous they are and all the rest of it, who are getting rich off the migration crisis that is hitting this country. We see it with the likes of Serco, G4S, all of these big public sector service companies that have provided these homes for the asylum seekers. We've seen it with hotels, and you do see it time and time again with these delivery companies, all of whom have got massive marketing budgets. You can't watch anything without being
very low
seen.
wages.
They're paying tiny wages. It is a business model where they know that this is right. They know that this is the big draw for these companies, and I want to see bosses of these companies prosecuted, hauled before the courts, and I don't want to see them being able to pretend they're these virtuous big great companies anymore. They're not great companies. These tech companies should be in jail.
Their business model is that we'll pay wages that most people couldn't live on. Well, yeah, but you can live on it if someone's paying your upkeep and for your hotel or your hostel, as we are for these people earning money. Just some breaking news before we go to a break. Campaign group Palestine Action. It's difficult to keep up with all these different organisations, but Palestine Action, they're the ones who basically caused, was it 35 million quid's worth of damage by throwing red paint on RAF planes at RAF Brize Norton. But that group is taking court action to try to block the government from banning it as a terrorist organisation. There's going to be a written parliament today to prescribe the group as a terrorist organisation. But a spokesman for their lawyers said, "I love these people because they love the law, don't they? When it suits them." Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts, particularly on the BBC. Keir Starmer and his welfare reforms, you name it. If you want to get hysterical about the heat wave, get in touch about that as well. Because just tell me what you think the odds are that you'll make it to the end of today. Because according to BBC and Sky, it's touch and go for all of us. 11:25 is the time. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
You've got members of the Israeli government, like Ben Motrick and Ben Gavir, talking about the Palestinians as animals. So, you know...
If you say death to the IDF, that's a lot worse.
No independent journalists can get into Gaza, and they can't report on what's happening. Now, Israel is also under attack. It's a complicated situation in which a pop group, which doesn't know much about it, has got involved. Let us be very careful not to overblow this. Let us not be very careful also to be aware that different sides will be using it for propaganda purposes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:27 is the time. Just to get you up to date on the developments on that Glastonbury performance by Bob Villan. A statement from the BBC today. The BBC said the BBC respects freedom of expression but stands firmly against incitement to violence. The anti-Semitic sentiments expressed by Bob Villan were utterly unacceptable and have no place on our airwaves. In light of this weekend, we will look at our guidance around live events so we can be sure teams are clear on when it is acceptable to keep output on air. The team were dealing with a live situation. Again, that was their choice to have it live streamed, but with hindsight we should have pulled the stream during the performance. We regret that this did not happen. Now, this, as Avon and Somerset Police are investigating this performance, and Ofcom have said they are very concerned. They're the media regulator and are looking into the decisions by the BBC, including a former BBC director of television pointing out that you would have pulled the live stream. That wouldn't have been up for debate. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that and on any of the big topics we're talking about today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go straight to Adam, who's in Lichfield. Hello, Adam.
Morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed, sir. Cooling down in the aircon. What about you?
No, it's a bit toasty. I'm just sitting in my car now. It's red hot, to be honest with you. So I'll get it done with.
Well, but yet somehow do you think you're going to survive? Because according to the BBC and Sky, I've got to be honest with you, there's touch and go.
I know. It's all the scaremongering as usual. I've got the pool filling up, so I should be all right by the end of the day.
Right, we're all going round Adams later. Right, Adam, what do you want to say?
I was just calling in regards to Glastonbury, which is, more like a Hitler rally these days, with the surrounding wall to keep out the poor. But for me...
no borders, they always say.
Yeah, exactly. For me, just listening to what you were talking about earlier in regards to Lucy, it's been locked up for hurty words, and what Bob Villan was saying. Now, for me, you say there's no direct correlation, that really what he'd done wasn't a direct consequence, but there could have been. Imagine being Jewish at that festival on Saturday. Imagine how unsafe you would have felt with loaded, drugged up, drunk people. If you found that you was Jewish, it would have been terrifying for them, I would have thought, on the weekend.
Well, I say a close family member was there and said it was actually, who's not Jewish, but felt very intimidated at times by the pro-Palestinian well, it's couched as anti-Israel, but I think a lot of it is anti-Semitic feeling there.
Yeah, 100%. I think your guy who had on earlier on was had it spot on. It's snobbery dressed up as punk rock, and that's what it is. It get looked down on people if you have any kind of different opinion. Yeah. They always seem to be more well informed than everybody else for some reason, which I don't get.
But I mean, do you think again? It's like when people, if you think about a chant that was the equivalent about I don't know, I would say genuinely any country that was majority black, or indeed about black people, I just think it would be a completely different matter, wouldn't it?
100%. I had a similar thing when I went to the Download Festival this year, and you had the lead singer of Green Day shouting, "Oh, America!" We're in England, by the way, but he's going, "America's a fascist country," and this and that. I'm thinking to myself, well, you're a musician that's been allowed to air your views. If you were living in a fascist country, you would have got back to America and you'd been locked up.
Yeah,
they don't make no sense.
No, but that's it. They're not the sharpest tools in the box, are they? But they've got their latest acceptable views, so they think they are. Adam, thank you for that. Appreciate it. You go and sit in your pool, mate. Honestly, Ben is in Lincolnshire. Hello, Ben.
Oh, hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well. Are you in your pool?
I will be when I get home, actually.
Seriously, how many people have got pools in this country? Are you joking?
No, I've got it's 18 foot by 9 foot.
Sorry. Let me just get my little violin out for you.
Oh, it's been bliss this weekend, Julia. It's been bliss, just sitting in there chilling.
Sorry, can we just have a poll? Is anyone here? what am I doing wrong in life? What am I doing wrong? Right, OK, Ben, I mean, I'm tempted to just cut you off now. Free speech, except for people who are gloating about having a pool. Mind you, I'm gloating about having good aircon in here now. It's finally working for Ben. What do you want to say about more important matters?
I'm sat in a dump truck on a really dusty building site, and they moan at you leaving the engine running all day, so... No, the aircon's off, so you got me on that one.
All right, then. What do you want to say, then? You want to talk about Glasgow?
Yeah, the BBC. I've been on live with you several times. I've been on a few of the BBC talk shows in the past. And there's this was many, many years ago, long before you even started at LBC, actually.
Wow.
So it's a while back. But, there's a delay. There's always a delay between what I say and what you broadcast. Because if I say something that's absolutely disgusting, out of order, insightful, then you stop it, because that's part of being a decent broadcaster. What the BBC did on Saturday is just prove that they are racist and anti-Semitic. There's just no other thing at all. Yeah, I stopped paying my TV licence and stopped watching live broadcast TV when Jimmy Savile's scandal broke. But I think if I was still paying it now, I would actually stop, because surely if the BBC had broadcasted racist propaganda like that, you're breaking the law by paying towards that organisation.
I mean, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting one. You're
agreeing with it. By paying the BBC, you are agreeing with whatever.
We're funding an organisation that's pushing those views. Very interesting. Do you know what? I'm going to put that to our next guest after the break, former BBC executive Roger Bolton. We always get lively. Ben, thank you very much. Another person with a sodding pool. 11:33. It's genuinely. I'm getting really annoyed about that now. Ben, thank you very much indeed. 11:33 is the time. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:35. We're just almost coming up to. Coming up, we're going to be talking about Ofcom. It's interesting how much we're talking about media today. I mean, we've talked about the stuff that actually happens, but Ofcom and trans ideology is in the news as well. But obviously, the big focus on the BBC right now is what happened at Glastonbury and those chants, death to the IDF chants from the rap duo Bob Vylan. We had a statement from the BBC saying they regret that they did not pull the stream during the performance. With hindsight, they say we should have pulled the stream. They've said the anti-Semitic sentiments expressed by Bob Vylan were utterly unacceptable, have no place on our airwaves. Well, let's talk about this with Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive. Good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Do you agree with the BBC that they should regret it and that they should have pulled the live stream?
Of course they should. It's a very bad mistake. They should have known. There's big questions to be asked about whether they checked beforehand about the nature of the band. I mean, they've been warned about this problem because there was another band, as you know, called Kneecap. Yeah. So there's no excuse for not knowing.
So it's due diligence, isn't it? They would have known what...
Due diligence. Yeah. They should have known. And now, they're not responsible for booking the bands. That's done by Glastonbury. The BBC covers the event. But of course, the BBC has a decision to make. Does it cover it or not? They should have known. They should have pulled it. They then should have made sure that nothing was available anywhere from that band. I'm surprised. They should have pulled it beforehand. When it was going out, they should have cut away, and they should make sure that it's not available anywhere. It's a bad, bad mistake.
And who would have made that mistake? Because there's been a lot of talk about, well, you know, these are music producers, they're involved in the entertainment. I mean, in fact, there are thousands of BBC people down at Glastonbury. It's a massive, big issue. I mean, you know, I was live streaming some of the performances yesterday home, and, you know, and you can, you know, watch a whole load of live stream, and a lot of it, you know, it's very well done. It's a massive, big affair. But who would have been responsible for making that decision? Like let's live stream, ? The moment the death to the IDF chant happened, choosing to press the button and move to another, you know, just cut that live feed, move to another one of the many stages. What level is that decision made?
Well, the problem is that with conventional problems, if you like, documentaries, current affairs or whatever, there's a system in the BBC for flagging up potentially controversial things, and that goes to a group that's supposed to examine it and supposed to stop these things happening. I think whether the BBC has been slow to realise that with a music occasion like this, you can have similar problems. It's difficult to understand why they should think that, because they had this warning about kneecap, and they obviously thought very hard about they decided not to cover them live, but to, you know, put them out recording, because there is a free speech issue here. I don't think, you know, which you got to be aware of. So you mustn't ban things just because you don't like them.
No, I didn't want kneecap ban. I mean, Keir Starmer said Glastonbury shouldn't have put them on stage, and the BBC definitely shouldn't stream it. My thing, I mean, I tweeted out, you know, the morning of their kneecap's performance, you know, if you go and watch kneecap, you know, you should examine your conscience, examine your head as well, given that you're at a music festival, and they are, you know, they've been accused of, you know, backing. And no, there's actually a criminal charge that's been brought in one issue of this, but they have been accused and alleged to have supported Hamas and Hezbollah. You know, Hamas carried out a massacre at a music festival, just like Glastonbury. And so literally, you need your head examined to be supporting them. But do you think that all the focus was on kneecap, and so they decided not to live stream kneecap, but they didn't think maybe we should also have a delay or not live stream the band before that who were supporting them on their tour?
I think so. But I think another thing they're going here is no excuse. The BBC spends about 7 million on Glastonbury, which is, given the number of hours, it sounds a lot, is not. The BBC has been spread very thin as a result of the reduction of licence fee. And it's chosen not to cut different areas, but to try to slim down everything. You have a suspicion that what must have happened here, or one of the contributing factors, is that they slimmed down too much. And that because it was a music event. And because, I know you do that, I know. They slimmed down too much in this area, that because they regard it as a music event, they weren't as alert as they should be.
I was going to say, we didn't have enough staff. We only had 1,500 staff, not 1,600, so we didn't have anyone. I mean, someone is in charge of making these decisions.
No, the argument...
And they're on a six-figure salary.
Yeah, Okay. The argument is not where the BBC is overstaffed generally, but where it puts its resources. And there must be a question mark about whether they put in somebody who was alert enough to these controversial issues. If they were, why weren't they doing their job?
But how senior should it go? Because people are calling even for like the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, to go on the basis of this was on the front, you know, kneecap were on the front page of newspapers, you know, the day before they performed. There was plenty of time for them to go, look, hold on a minute. Is he not, you know, he's not the chairman, he's the Director General. He directs what happens. I know he doesn't decide every single, we're going to live stream this or that, but he's in charge of, you know, of what goes on at the BBC. He's responsible for their output fundamentally. Does he have questions to answer? Should he go?
Well, he has questions to answer. He shouldn't go, in my view. But I think what it illustrates, he needs a flag catcher at the top. In the past, there's always been a sort of Deputy Director General whose job is to spot these sort of things and watch out for them. I mean, the Director General's job is an impossible job when you think...
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
You know, and he's done a very good job in many areas, but there's a real gap here. He is ultimately responsible. He is responsible for the gap. But I think he's done such a good job, he shouldn't do it. But some head should roll.
Some head should roll. Well, there's talk about, I mean, the BBC obviously they regret, so they're admitting there's a problem. Ofcom are looking into this, and Ofcom say they are very concerned about this. Now, bearing in mind, Ofcom don't get involved until after people have done their complaints to the BBC normally, so they are saying we're just going to get involved from word go. The police, Avon and Somerset Police, the local police for Glastonbury, looking into not just the performers, but also Glastonbury's choice to have them, and also the BBC. Because there is a question mark over the criminality, whether there's a criminal aspect to the BBC, not just a matter of taste and competence from the BBC, but also that actually their decision to choose to broadcast and to continue to broadcast someone inciting violence and hatred. And again, we've not included everything. It wasn't just the chant about the IDF. There was a long story, a detailed story about Zionists, spat out, which I think, I'm sorry, most of the time when people use that word, what they actually mean is Jews. That they just pretend
I think
that's
there is, but
so there's a big question mark about criminality at the BBC as well.
Yeah, there is. No, well, hold on a second. What happens on these occasions is that politicians jump in, right? Say, the Home Secretary ringing the Director General. She shouldn't have done that. She should have gone to Ofcom and whatever. You then have a shadow Home Secretary calling for prosecution of the BBC. They shouldn't do that. They should leave that up. They should leave it up to the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. It's their decision. And there is an issue, and I'm surprised to be saying this to you because I know you're such a powerful advocate. There is a genuine question of freedom of speech here. We've got to be very careful. There are a lot of propaganda. There's a propaganda war going on here. And there's a lot of people who want to say any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Well, some of it is, but some of it isn't.
I agree with you.
If you read Israeli newspapers, Haaretz and so on, you can see much greater criticism of the IDF and so on.
Yes,
than you
can. A lot made up in Haaretz as well.
So we've got to be very careful we don't suppress freedom of speech, and we don't say because your opinions aren't, the mainstream ones, you get suppressed.
No, and people are trying to chant pre-Palestine, and they're entitled to make their.
I agree in this case. I agree with you. I totally agree with you that this language is unacceptable. I agree it should be examined for whether or not people should be prosecuted. And what I don't like is politicians and pressure groups jumping in and trying to.
Shouldn't they? But don't people have a right? Isn't that part of their freedom of speech to jump in and say when they're forced to have this stuff? You want to watch a music festival. I mean, again, I know I've got a family member who was there at part of that gig and was horrified by what was happening.
I agree, but be very careful. I mean, politicians are always reacting in their own interests, and it may not be our interests. Media monitoring groups are always acting for a section of the population, not for the rest.
Oh no, exactly. I don't trust Ofcom on this at all. But
no, well, we've got to be careful. But I agree with you. The BBC has to, and it's not. We don't want a long investigation for the BBC that takes 2 months or something like that. This is very simple, which is basically, did they do due diligence beforehand?
Yeah.
Why, when it was going out, did they cut it? Did they make sure afterwards that it was not available on the iPlayer at all? And finally, will they hold somebody accountable? Because this is an occasion where you can't just say, oh, sorry, we've made a mistake.
Very much appreciate you joining us, Roger Bolton, former BBC executive. You know who's really, really upset about what's happened with not just Kneecap, but then Bob Villan? It's Gary Lineker, because he gave his very first interview in a talk at the Glastonbury Festival where he said the BBC had lost their way when it comes to impartiality. And it's his first interview since he left Match of the Day. And he revealed the corporation announced his exit even before making him aware of their decision. And he would really have liked to have been on the front pages about that, and he was posing with, the usual suspect MPs and the like. But sadly, no, Gary, that's all the mention you're going to get today, because no one really cares. Just go and sell some crisps, have your silly views, and be on your way. But Sam, what do you make of what Roger Bolton had to say, that there are really big questions, but this idea that, someone didn't realise it was their job, someone didn't know, I mean, again, the cuts at the BBC, I mean, £7 million. It's a huge, I get that it's a huge process, and having live feeds like that, the number of people you need involved, the camera people, I get all of that. But the idea there wasn't someone senior there to go, cut the feed, is ridiculous.
Yeah, Roger's a very nice man. He's often very sensible, but he's talking utter nonsense. Anybody at any level in the production should have had the common sense. You don't need special training to know that when somebody starts shouting death to the IDF, that it is inappropriate to be broadcast on a public network. And if you don't understand that, if you don't get that point, you are not fit to work at a public broadcaster. And you don't need to be paying £7 million. You don't need to be paid 100 grand a year in order to know that's nonsense. The BBC needs to employ people in production capacities that have an iota, a shred of common sense. And if they can't,
decency.
And if they can't find them, well, I guess any of the people who've called in today who are paid a darn lot less than senior BBC executives would be more than happy to volunteer for the position.
I'm just saying,
have that
there is no way in the world that us at Talk or GB News would ever honestly, we would be taken off air. We'd all be prosecuted, we'd be taken off air because the rules are different. And I've said it before and I will say it again. The problem at the BBC is no one thought it was a problem. And the reason why they didn't think it was a problem is because so many people at the BBC share those views because they are now institutionally anti-Semitic. It doesn't mean every single person there is anti-Semitic. It doesn't mean that some of the people who would agree with those views are anti-Semitic. You're allowed to criticise Israel? Absolutely. I criticise the Israeli government to the Israeli ambassador when she's sitting in front of me. There's no problem with that at all. I have some question marks over Wes Streeting's choice at the weekend to whataboutery on this issue, mentioned the West Bank settlements, but I've got some big issues with what's going on in the West Bank with settler violence as well. You can do that and not be anti-Semitic. Do I think that that's a question that is something you could possibly claim about Bob Villan? No, I don't. Do I think that the BBC staff en masse are awake to the fact that they are institutionally anti-Semitic? No, they don't. Their best defence is we didn't realise that we had a problem with Jews. But you know what, BBC? You do. 11:47 is the time. I tell you what Ofcom think that broadcasters have a problem with, and that's transphobia, because apparently, despite the Supreme Court ruling and despite, biological sex being real, apparently it is no longer to be considered a settled issue that trans women are not women. I sodding well kid you not. We'll talk about that with Fiona McInerney at Sex Matters up next. This is Talk.
You've got members of the Israeli government, like Ben Motrick and Ben Gavir, talking about the Palestinians as animals. So,
if you say death to the IDF, that's a lot worse.
No independent journalists can get into Gaza, and they can't report on what's happening. Now, Israel is also under attack. It's a complicated situation in which a pop group, which doesn't know much about it, has got involved. Let us be very careful not to overblow this. Let us not be very careful also to be aware that different sides will be using it for propaganda purposes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just a reminder, by the way, if you've missed anything of the show, wow, if you've missed the first hour, and indeed the first 50 minutes of this hour, you have missed a thing. Do go to my YouTube page, cunningly called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show on YouTube. Hit subscribe and you will never, ever miss a thing. But do remember to have a go and have a look at that. Right now, though, we've been talking about Ofcom. They're getting involved. They said they're very concerned about what happened at Glastonbury and this death to the IDF chant and numerous other things said by the punk rap duo Bob Villan. But the Ofcom has also decided to get into the news over other issues, including gender, because broadcasters have been told they must give airtime to claims that biological men are women i.e. trans women are women, when covering trans issues. The media regulator warned GB News in a letter after they queried this that he could not treat the controversy as settled, despite the Supreme Court ruling back in April, which made it very clear that for the purposes of the law, biological sex is what mattered, not what anyone thinks they are on a Monday morning or a Wednesday afternoon. But Ofcom has said that the judge's ruling does not mean the matter is settled, despite the fact the regulator does believe that other issues are settled. So, for instance, climate change is real and man-made. They genuinely have put in writing that they believe that to be settled matter, settled science. Biological reality, not settled. This is the territory we're in, folks. Imagine having to deal with that. And those people are the people who regulate what we're allowed to broadcast. Imagine that. Well, let's talk about it with Fiona McInerney. She's Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, who were a party to that Supreme Court judgment from 4 Women Scotland. Very good morning to you, Fiona.
Good morning, Julia.
I've always found it highly amusing that there are certain issues that are considered to be settled matters, that you can't just broadcast one side because this is a settled matter like climate change. And I've pointed this out to many people who never believe me when I tell them this. But apparently the issue of biological sex, so scientific fact, is not settled, even though it's been settled by the Supreme Court as legal fact, and pretty much every 6-year-old know it's biological fact. According to Ofcom, the media regulator in this country, not settled.
I think this can only point to 2 things, really. One is the fear or cowardice or lack of leadership of our regulators. And here's yet another example. And the other is the power and influence of the trans lobby that seems to have cowed all these people into pretending that they don't know that sex is real. And as you said, it's not even a matter of what the law says or what the Supreme Court says. Even they don't have the power to change sex. Even if they did say that a man could be a woman, it still wouldn't be reality, because that's not how biology works. So I'm afraid it shows us how far we still have to go to get people to remember that we all have rights. And it's not only people with trans identities who are entitled to be offended or hurt or indeed to hear what they want to hear. We all need to hear the truth.
Yeah, exactly. I just find it extraordinary. So the idea that if I were having a conversation with somebody where we would say, well, with you, so trans women are not women because they're men, because by definition someone who's trans woman, claims to be a trans woman, is biologically male, so they're not a woman. And I consider it to be matter of fact, and I don't care. There's no one at Ofcom, there's no one that's going to convince me that I have to have a second opinion on that from somebody who says, oh, no, actually, here I am, I'm a bearded 6-foot bloke, and I believe I'm a woman, and that's the end of the matter. Now, I don't believe that's an opinion I have to have on, in the same way that when I say that I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe that I need to have someone on say, oh, no, ghosts are real. I think that's genuinely absurd. But if I have a debate with somebody who believes that, someone, who's absolutely convinced that, the hot weather we're getting is as a result of man-made climate change, and that appears to be most broadcasters who think this, though it's still a theory, I would not be required to have on a climate change sceptic as well, because it's settled science what that guest is saying. I mean, is this not just evidence that this is what we're up against in terms of the quangocrats in this country, whether it's civil service, whether it's Ofcom, whether it's any other sort of public body, where this wokey left trans-dominated thing absolutely controls everything that is said and done in this country?
Well, it's quite bizarre, because even trans identifying men know that they're still men. Otherwise, they wouldn't be, insisting that we all have to be so careful around our language.
Or want to have hormones or have any treatment or any surgery. You wouldn't need it, would you?
No, and you and I know that what someone else says about us doesn't change the reality of who we are or what we are. It really doesn't depend on other people's language. So this whole policing of language is a proof of how shaky this whole ideology is. But it's very disappointing that regulators, especially the ones who are supposed to help the public understand what's real and control broadcasters to be honest and accurate, it's very disappointing that the regulator isn't prepared to declare it as a settled matter. That men are male and women are female, and no one.
But again, we've got this with I think with IPSO that regulates the newspapers as well, and same with Ofcom in terms of broadcasters. The response also suggests that broadcasters should use a person's preferred pronouns. No. I have done that in the past as a matter of courtesy. I sometimes do it by accident because you just get used to, someone who presents in a certain way. But I've learned to my cost that if you start doing that, you go down a slippery slope where a woman who's been sexually assaulted is in court having to refer to the man who attacked her and her penis. I mean, this is where that leads. But if we've got the people who are regulating what can and cannot be said on the airwaves in this country, basically saying you need to pretend that you believe something you know factually is not true and that is, as a matter of fact, factually not true and is legally factually not true by the Supreme Court judgment. That is Stalinist, Orwellian, terrifying territory.
Well, it's extraordinary because you'd think that Ofcom, of all people, would know that the responsibility of broadcasters is to their audiences. It's not to the tender feelings of people who don't like what sex they are. And so even this idea of courtesy, I think, is a bit misdirected. It's been laid on us all, Julia, that we all have to be courteous to trans-identifying people. That's fair enough. I don't want to be rude particularly, but I also have a responsibility to speak clearly in order to protect everyone else's rights. Yes. And if someone doesn't like that, then I may have to hurt their feelings. But broadcasters shouldn't be worrying about people's feelings. They should be worrying about reality and truth.
But it is about up and down. Look at it. It's just the example of someone who's standing there who is white insisting they're black, going, well, you're not, you're black. Or someone who is, 5 foot tall insisting they're 6'5". But you're not. You're 5 foot tall. So am I supposed to have someone on who says, no, they are 6'5"? Because that's the level of madness and doublethink that we are being required to broadcast. I won't do it. End of. I don't care if I'm Ofcom, and I've made it very clear to bosses, I will pay the fine myself. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to crowdsource it. Might give JK a call if you've got her number. But I just refuse. I refuse to lie on air.
Well, it's only this one special issue as well where, and quite honestly, I think it comes down to male feelings. If it were you and I demanding special words and special treatment, I don't think we'd get very far.
Absolutely, nailed it always. Fiona McNenna, fantastic campaigner on this issue, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters. Sam Armstrong, you've been a voice of sanity on this. I mean, look, this is, again, we talk about freedom of speech. This is controlled speech by Ofcom, who are as woke as Quango Crack going. They are part of the problem.
And look, they're a representative of the lanyard class that run this country. But at its root, trans feelings or gender dysphoria is a mental health condition that some people very sadly do not feel that they are in the body that they are. And what we have done is, rather than help those people, rather than support them, we have all had to try and lie and indulge ourselves in a mutual mass delusion. And the tragedy of that is it was not kind actually to trans people who we have furthered in their thoughts that have allowed many of them to mutilate their own bodies. Devastating consequences. It's not kind to the rest of us, and it is just a sign of how far our society has fallen from this basic sense.
If you're going to have a regulatory body that forces broadcasters to lie, you are in very, very, very questionable territory. Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and all the other topics we're talking about. Up next, we're going to be talking to Shadow Home Office Minister Matt Vickers about where we are with the BBC, with Glasgow. Also, those welfare reforms. Are those Labour MPs right to revolt? It's all coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have your company. If you missed anything from the show the last couple of hours, you missed a rip-roaring show, if you don't mind me saying. The guests, not me, obviously. But do take a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about Keir Starmer blasting the BBC, demanding an explanation from the corporation for the decision to air Glastonbury act Bob Vylan's vile anti-Semitic hate speech at the weekend. The pro-Palestinian act repeatedly chanted death, death to the IDF on the live stream on the BBC iPlayer, but this was not pulled. No one pressed the button. Well, a statement from the BBC today in this last hour or so has said that they regret not pressing the button, not pulling the live stream, and they should have pulled that and said the anti-Semitic sentiments expressed by Bob Vylan were utterly unacceptable and have no place on our airwaves. I'm asking you today, though, whether or not the police, as we know, are already investigating. Should they be investigating BBC executives? Should people be losing their jobs? Should Bob Vylan, the act, face criminal charges themselves? Or is that, well, just basically as bad as prosecuting Lucy Connolly? But if you can prosecute Lucy Connolly for so-called hurty words and apparently incitement to violence, then surely this act, this Bob Vylan act, should be prosecuted as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about Keir Starmer's last-ditch bid to convince Labour MPs to back his cuts to disability benefits after a massive watering down. Just the latest, 3 U-turns now on major public policy issues. Will he get his vote through tomorrow? We've got the Works and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, making a statement to Parliament later on today. But has the Prime Minister, even before he hits his 1-year anniversary, already lost, frankly, all of his authority? Plus, in the latest edition of Eco-Hypocrisy, the wedding of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez saw the arrival of nearly 100 private jets into Venice from celebrities who usually spend a lot of their time telling us about the dangers of climate change. But one rule for them, one rule for us, usual form. Well, we'll talk about all of that coming up. Right now, let me introduce you to commentator Sam Armstrong, who is joining us throughout the show. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Good
once
afternoon.
Again. Just very briefly, because you and I discussed this at length, does the BBC statement change anything for you? A statement issued in the last hour. The BBC respects freedom of expression but stands firmly against incitement to violence. The anti-Semitic sentiments expressed by Bob Vylan were utterly unacceptable and have no place on our airwaves. In light of this weekend, we will look at our guidance around live events so we can be sure teams are clear on when it is acceptable to keep output on air. The team were dealing with a live situation, but with hindsight, we should have pulled the stream during the performance. We regret that this did not happen. Is that gonna fly, given that they knew what this band were? There'd already been concerns raised about Kneecap, the band who this band was supporting on the stage, that they could have seen this, and it doesn't matter whether it's live or not, you can press the button at any time and cut the live stream.
Utterly pathetic, mealy-mouthed excuse making. These guys who were sent down there at licence fees payers' expense had one job, which was to ensure that the output that was broadcast well, that it looked good, that it sounded good, and that crucially, critically, there were people sent down to ensure that it complied with editorial guidance. And it wasn't like they weren't warned that stuff on that stage, on that stream, were likely to be on the line, which is because Kneecap was on afterwards. They had one job to do, they failed. And I don't want to hear that we're going to make guidance clearer, that we're going to come up with this or that policy, that lessons will be learned. I don't want to hear it. I want to know who was responsible, why they failed to do it, and if there isn't an adequate excuse, I want them out the door, no longer taking a salary at licence fees payers' expense.
Okay, now it's interesting because you're a free speaker and your argument is that people shouldn't be prosecuted, but you should lose your job. Well, let's put all of this to Matt Vickers, who's a Conservative MP, he's also Shadow Home Office Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Matt.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, your boss, I suppose, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, he has called for, police to get involved. Lots of talk for, the Director General of the BBC to go. What action should be taken against both Bob Vylan, the rap duo, and the BBC?
We are definitely in that space. We've heard an apology. It's an apology. We want to see what's going to be done about it. You make rightly the contrast between Lucy Connolly and this situation. Somebody tweeting to whatever followers they might have on Twitter versus absolutely vile, horrific stuff that's happened to here, but being broadcast by a state broadcaster, paid for by licence fee payers. It is entirely unacceptable. Someone needs to be held to account. And the people who choose to spew this vile stuff out on stage to this huge audience deserve to face real consequences.
Well, look, for people who've been living under a stone for the last couple of days, let's play a little clip. Again, there is a difference between people informing people by what with the chant, as opposed to just putting out as if it's just acceptable. So this is what the punk rap duo, born in the ghettos of Ipswich, what they had to say to some 30,000 live crowd at Glastonbury, one of the stages, and of course many, many more watching on the live stream on the BBC. This is the chant.
Death, death to the IDF, 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 death, death to the IDF. Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
I mean, I'm thinking after the first death test to the IDF, you'd have another 4 chances to push the button on that. Is the BBC treated differently from any other broadcasters? Because I'm pretty darn sure that if we here at Talk or any other rival station broadcast something similar, something equivalent, we'd be hauled over the coals. Ofcom say they're looking into it and they're very concerned. But I think the rules seem to be different, in particular when it comes to the BBC admitted anti-Semitic sentiments. This wasn't the only thing that this guy had to say on stage. If anyone was, my station or many other stations, if they'd shouted stuff about black people or Muslims, do you think that the same reaction would have been had by the BBC staff? Or do you agree with me, and it's a point I put to a very senior executive at the BBC who was outraged when I said this to them, that actually the BBC is now institutionally anti-Semitic?
It is. Well, we saw the carry on with the documentary by, Hamas relatives. On you come, tell us your worldview. But
this is a little boy who was supposed to be some little lad and there's an hour-long documentary, and it turns out he's the son of a Hamas official.
Yeah, I mean, utterly ridiculous. That is what the BBC is feeding us. But the public rely on the BBC. Stupidly, we all pay our licence fees. Well, some of us pay our licence fees or don't, to contribute to this thing. It's meant to be independent. It's meant to be above politics. It's meant to be above all this shenanigans. But you rightly say, Vic, if something of the same style happened on your channel, it would be real consequence. There should be 2 bars. But their bar should be higher than yours. They are funded by taxpayers against our will. There are options as to whether people tune in to a channel or not. They're paying for that, whether they like it or not. It's absolutely horrendous. I also think there should be consequences for Glastonbury. This guy didn't turn up by surprise. We didn't go, how shocking, we didn't see this coming. They knew exactly what to expect from this guy. There is no big surprises. It should never have been allowed. And the same applies to Kneecap. Entirely unacceptable.
Does it apply to Jade from Little Mix, who shouted F to reform and F to, thing is, it's now the thing. I mean, Kate Nash as well, another performer. It's now the thing to just, swear, be abusive about people with different political views. That's now the norm. Shouldn't the argument be, could we take the politics out of music, these performances? Could we take the politics out of sport, taking the knee, rainbow lanyards, you name it? Could we just have a little bit of fun without being lectured?
But it's also not just difference in opinions on politics, is it? Because Kneecap are out there calling for riots. You've got this guy calling for death to certain
They called
people.
for a riot outside the court when Kneecap next appear, yeah.
It's a level above just having differences in political opinion. But actually, that's, I think, one of the problems with society today is actually all these big stars who young people look up to, like the footballers. Can you remember when Eric Cantona kicked somebody in the crowd and everybody went, oh my God, that's disgusting. Now, look at what footballers do now. These people are they're the people who young people aspire to be and to behave like. And we have pop stars doing it, we have footballers doing it, and there are huge, huge consequences for society. Not only that, not only are they doing it, but we're now paying for them to do it via the power of the BBC. It is entirely unacceptable.
Should people be forced to pay for the BBC? Look, we've had people say that, they don't want to pay their licence fee anymore, whether they watch live TV or not.
I think this brings it, you know what? Every year Glastonbury gets worse and worse, more vile, more disgusting. Every so many months we have this debate about the BBC and what they are and aren't broadcasting, and how it lacks any form of political neutrality or independence. This has turned the dial again. We need to go back again. We need to have a national debate again about the state of the BBC, and we probably need to put it out of its misery.
Oh, very interesting. So you think it's time for the BBC to be unfunded?
I think we need to look at it again. I think this has brought things to another new low bar for the BBC. It's absolutely appalling. Somebody needs to be held to account. It's all well and good issuing an apology. There needs to be action. We need to make sure that this cannot carry on. And if it is going to carry on, then they can go and form some lefty channel somewhere and get on with it, not at the cost of the taxpayer.
OK, right. Well, let's talk about what else is. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be statements coming up in Parliament this week about all of this. But where are we in terms of welfare reforms? Because the Prime Minister's been accused of a third massive U-turn with fuel payments, whether or not there should be a national public inquiry into the rape gangs, the grooming gangs, but also now on disability benefits. He was facing a rebellion by some 126 backbench Labour MPs at the vote tomorrow in the House of Commons. Over the weekend, we know he's been ranging back, and so basically the changes to disability benefits, to personal independence payments, that's going to only affect people going forward, not people who are signing on going forward, but not people who are already on those benefits. Is that the right thing for the Prime Minister to have done?
I think there's two massive illustrations of what's going on here. One is the guy cannot stand by his principles. He cannot deliver what he's decided is right for the country. He thinks it's the right thing to do. He can't deliver it. He's got a massive majority, an unspeakable majority, and cannot get this stuff through. Why isn't he able to convince his own MPs that he's doing the right thing? But the other big problem is the fact he's already spent what he thought he was going to save from this. We're already running up that huge debt. We're already saddling people with unprecedented levels of tax. And he thinks that, where's the money going to come from? This is a huge amount of money. The IFS reckons that the welfare bill will be 66 billion by 29-30. It's got to come from somewhere. We cannot have more people hit with more taxes. There's now the whole debate around the two-child benefit cap. These things, it's not sustainable. People out there trying to earn a living, trying to work, trying to get on the housing ladder, people trying to run businesses, create jobs, deliver economic growth, battered by unprecedented levels of tax. He's already spent what he was meant to be saving with this, and now he's going to have to go back to the drawing board, which probably means more tax for those hardworking people across the country.
Look, a lot of people I know will be agreeing with everything you said, but they'd also quite rightly point out that you guys are the Tories, you put taxes up to unprecedented levels yourselves, and you allowed that benefits explosion. Huge number of people, 1 in 10 working age people now on these sorts of benefits, 1 in 8 young people on these sorts of benefits. There's no evidence whatsoever that Britain is uniquely impacted by either lockdown or COVID or anything else that means that we have so many people, particularly the biggest growth has been in those claiming to have mental health issues, compared with any other country, neighbouring or around the world, that has also gone through the same pandemic. That's the one everyone goes, oh, it all changed then. You guys were in office, you presided over this, and now you're saying, oh, isn't it terrible? Keir Starmer won't do anything about it. You're the ones that let it happen.
Well, two probes there. One is about the cost and the taxes. Well, one thing that did happen that was unprecedented is the scale of the cost of COVID. If you walk down the high street here and ask businesses what they got during the pandemic that allowed them to carry on business, allowed them to keep those jobs going, and allowed our economy to keep going. That's one thing in terms of costs and taxes.
But that, by the way, that wasn't the cost of COVID. That was the cost of lockdown policy.
Well, we can have that debate, but actually...
No, we don't have that. I don't think... No, that was the cost. Let's be accurate with our speech. The reason why businesses needed help to keep afloat was because they were forced to close their doors and not work.
We were right to support them. I was a rebel during the pandemic. We know that all too well. I got into lots of trouble for it, and it got me wrist slapped, and probably would have been doing a different job by now. But yes, there was lots of consequences, but one thing that I am grateful from the previous government is the fact they supported these businesses. And go and take you to a few businesses in my high street that wouldn't be here now.
Given that they've done the dumb policy of closing everything down, I'm glad that people got support. We're paying for it now, and everyone knew we'd be paying for it now. But that's still not an excuse for basically a massive increase. I mean, a huge explosion in the number of people, particularly young people, claiming disability benefits because everyone's being assessed on Zoom.
So I couldn't agree more in terms of the people out of work. But actually, The last government, what they did do is they brought in other sanctions. They brought in universal credit, which was revolutionary in changing the game and holding people to account. We were told we were evil, cruel, horrendous people for supporting such policy. Two-child cap. The debate's out again, but actually it was the right thing to do. There was that example that was in the paper about someone with 12 kids taking home £40,000 a year, while other people are struggling to make ends meet and pay their own bills while subsidising those. It's wrong, but the one thing that was going right is near record levels of employment. There were 4 million more people in work, and actually the scary thing about this welfare debate is the channels that they're picking. There are going to be more people out of work. This bill will inevitably rise as they take the axe to anybody who tries to work for a living and create jobs. Any small business out there, go to your local pub, go to your local retailer, go to any business in the country who's been hit with that jobs tax, who's been hit with those changes to business rates relief. They are losing, they're creating more unemployed people, and this bill will inevitably rise, not only because they haven't got the bottle to go through with the reforms that they need to go through with, but because there are more people out of work.
But do you accept that the reforms that Keir Starmer was proposing didn't even touch the sides of the need in terms of what needed to be done? And the reason why the problem is so bad is because you guys allowed it to become that bad. The explosion has happened since 2020. You guys were in office for 4 of those years.
There was a scheme there, there was a plan there to take 12 billion off it. That would have been the right thing to do. He's watered it down, he's made it wet, he's only doing half the job, and actually he's then bottled doing half the job. We'll never get the full fat reforms that we need that will actually be for benefit. They're not just a benefit to our economy. It's not just a benefit to the people who are working and contributing to the system. It's a benefit to those people who are spending a lifetime out of work. Ambitions, aspirations, binned, mental health conditions on the rise because people aren't actually having meaningful lives where they can go out and live their best life, earn a living, aspire to do more. You can't just throw people on the scrap heap and expect there not to be consequences. It's not just wrong on the people who pay the tax, it's wrong on the people who are left on the scrap heap out of work.
I mean, again, another reason why lots of people are out of work is a lot of times work doesn't pay enough for you to actually live a life, unless, for instance, you're an asylum seeker, you've arrived and you're put into an asylum hotel, and the rest of us are paying taxes to pay for your asylum hotel, which is what we've seen this Big Sun expose the last week or so of basically people arriving here and being able to basically subcontract a licence to be a food delivery rider for Uber Eats, Deliveroo and Just Eat. We know that the Home Office is calling in the senior figures in those 3 companies and others to say, like, you know, sort it out, because we've got the reporter, we spoke to him on the show only last week. He's gone out and he's basically said, you pretended to be an asylum seeker, and he's been given, you know, these apps, and he's been literally told, yeah, you can pay 40 quid, you can sign on, you can deliver this food. And he's actually saying to the people he's delivering to, like, you know, this is the basis on which I've got to deliver this food. We need to crack down on this, don't we? But the reality is a lot of these big companies making billions of pounds in profit worldwide, their operating practice is based on, we will pay wages that are below what most people who are living legally and paying for their own accommodation could ever afford to accept, and we are going to be subsidised effectively by the taxpayer funding people like asylum seekers to do this job for a lower rate. It's part of the system now, isn't it?
There's also these ridiculous people who are profiting like hell from running these hotels, putting these people up in ever-increasing numbers since the last government came in, up 28%. But actually, those people, what is going on when they see all these Deliveroo bikes parked outside? What on earth is going on that there is nobody goes, we're getting this much money from the government to house these people, and we think we should also just turn a blind eye to all this going outside? It's absolutely unbelievable and unacceptable. And when it comes to Deliveroo and Uber Eats and all the other, in fact, I shouldn't name them because I'm promoting them, shouldn't I? We should hold them to a higher account. The public should hold them to a higher account, and we should give them a damn good kicking over it. And the first one that comes out and takes the measures necessary to stop it, that's who we should be supporting. We should hold them to account, kick them about, and find out who's willing to make a stand and employ people properly. I'd be willing to pay a little bit more to get it paid by someone who's legitimately earning a living than allowing people to capitalise on this situation.
Exactly. I think a lot of us feel the same way. Matt Vickers, Tory MP, Shadow Home Office Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Covered quite a lot of ground there. Sam Armstrong, listening to what he had to say. It's interesting, actually, just been handed, just as we lost the line there. Keir Starmer's watered-down welfare reforms will still push an additional 150,000 people into poverty, according to the government's own modelling. This has just been released by the government. It's about the impact of the welfare bill. Puts a new number of people being pushed into poverty. Again, it's relative poverty. It is important. We're not talking about people like shoeless, you know, on a rubbish heap in India, trying to pick out little scraps of food. Relative poverty is relative to average wages or median wages, and is a very different thing. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this whole argument has got into a real pickle in which everybody feels like it's their benefits or their welfare that is being spoken about. And yet we all know that there are people that are swinging a leg, and when they do so, they are stealing money from you and from me and from everybody that works hard, and frankly from everybody that can't work and needs the welfare support, because they're having to take, frankly, too little support because other people are draining the budget with illegitimate claims. And I'm sorry, but if you have gone in and it's your third or fourth year claiming that your anxiety or your depression is making you too unwell to work, I think we need to have a very good look at whether going out to work, doing a job, having a routine, doing the things that all of us do and are frankly good for us. I know that after a week's lying around on the sofa, I'm left in a state that isn't too well and all the rest of it. That's the right way forward. And we need to get back to a stage in which we say, look, if you can play cricket on a Sunday, if you can do this at the weekend, you can go out, do a job, contribute just like the rest of us.
Absolutely.
That's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I just find it absolutely short. I think an awful lot of these MPs, especially the Labour backbench MPs, who are hand-wringing and, you know, and they're actually immoral. They're actually immoral. The country doesn't have the money. Getting people back to work is actually a good thing for those people and for the country. And again, I keep seeing these broadcasts where they'll say, we'll get the view of somebody who thinks the welfare reforms go far enough and somebody who doesn't think the welfare reforms go far enough. But it's always from this perspective, you know, and yes, of course we should be worried about people who are disabled and need these personal independence payments, absolutely. But no one ever says, should we talk to a taxpayer paying for it? Like, that's the other side. No one remembers that. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We've got lots of calls coming in about Glastonbury and the BBC. Can't wait to get to those. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Don't forget those calls charged at the national rate. First up, though, the reunion of the century is just around the corner, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of Oasis tickets in Manchester on July the 19th. Yeah, you heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but talk can get you in. That's not all, though. Alongside the tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel and put $5 grand in your back pocket, completely tax-free. Listen up right now for everything you need to know and how to enter.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter in the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century, a hotel stay and $5 grand spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July. This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
Good luck, everyone. 12:25 is the time. Up next, your calls. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
There's an altered state there, notwithstanding the sleps that fly in. The climate, everything's changing, you know, poor us, poor the world, save the world. And yet, they're flying in and out from the helipads. It's just what planet?
It used to be a music festival. It used to be a music festival. And like all things that start down the trajectory of sort of woke leftism, it keeps going and keeps going until reality is a dot on the horizon behind it.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Let's get straight to your calls, your texts, your tweets coming in thick and fast about, well, you know, what should be done about the small matter of BBC chiefs allowing rappers Bob Vylan's death to the IDF chant at Glastonbury. Should they face charges? Should they lose their jobs? Well, you've been getting in touch. Lucy Connolly got jail time, says Peter, for a deleted tweet which was accused of inciting violence. Two-tiered justice. This Bob Vylan Act doesn't get the same. I do love the fact that the US are already looking at revoking their visa for a US tour later in the year. You know, tee-hee, careful what you wish for. Lisa says, free speech, why would anyone face charges other than Netanyahu than the IDF for genocide and war crimes? IDF are not committing genocide. There may or may not be war crimes. They're often in many wars. But, you know, Lisa, you're probably more concerned about the IDF than you are about Hamas. That's your choice. Ellie says, yes, they should face charges. Glastonbury organisers should certainly make a rule that the people they put on stage cannot call for the mass murder of Jews. I mean, that would be a low bar expectation, wouldn't it? Sally says, yes, the BBC should have stopped the broadcast as soon as messages of terrorism, hatred and incitement started to be spoken, except they should have known that was what was going to happen. William says, if you jail people for criticism of multiculturalism, yes. Very interesting. Right, let's go straight to Alice, who's on the line in London, who's called it on 0344 499 1000. Good afternoon to you, Alice.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
So nice to speak to you.
And you, what do you want to say?
I just want to make a few points. The first is that why did this start in the first place? There were young people at a music festival. Why at Glastonbury, for all these years, have there not been stars on that stage screaming and shouting, bring them home? Have they no sympathy? If this had happened in any other country in the world, I promise you everybody would have a different view. They just don't like it because it's Israel and because it's Jewish innocent children that were taken, raped and murdered. If that had happened at Glastonbury, what would be the outcry? Would they be screaming for Bob Vylan, or would they be screaming because they were running away from terrorists? That's my first point.
Nailed it.
Second point,
Nailed it.
I thought Dawn French reached a new low. But I am sorry, what happened on the weekend is a new disgusting level. And the fact is, from the beginning, the BBC have been perpetrating this war. In my view, they have blood on their hands. From the very first reporting, when we stood out the BBC, when they said that Israel had bombed a hospital and people were screaming, and that put in jeopardy all the hostage negotiations. Nobody is telling us about the hostages that are still there. Why are there not yellow ribbons? Why are not the BBC asking for the hostages to be released?
Well, it's not the job of the BBC to do that. I mean, I don't expect them to sort of take sides as such. It's what I do expect them to do is show due diligence. So, for instance, every time they report, and they do on a daily basis, there's been another massacre of innocent Palestinian men, women, and children at a food aid site. Again, and yet somehow the 1.5 million mobile phones in Gaza, not a single one of those have captured any footage of any of these daily massacres. I find extraordinary, and yet they still show that footage. Well, so still put that story out without having any footage to go with it. That tells me at that point that they are imbued with institutional anti-Semitism, that they will believe something for which they've got no evidence when the people telling them are people who have repeatedly lied about everything happening in Gaza.
Yes, because they don't report that, for example, they are killing Americans and people who are bringing the aid in so that Hamas can take it over. But I just want to make one more point, if you don't mind.
Do.
As a member of the Jewish community, what this does, by allowing it on the BBC, suddenly it's all over social media. Suddenly it's all over the world. And the cancer that we are already dealing with is growing and it's seeping out everywhere. So when we go on our next rally to counter them, what are they going to be screaming at us? That's what I want to know. And will the police do anything? Because they can't, because there's so many of them. And we are just a tiny minority everywhere, except in Israel, where we feel that we are safe unless we are bombed by Iran. And it's so unfair, unjust. And the BBC, I'm sorry, need to do something. They can't just talk. They have to walk the walk.
Alice, thank you so much. I mean, every single word every single word. Thank you. 12:31 is the time. Let's go to Barry. He's in London. Barry, follow that.
Hi, Julia. Yes. Well, Julia, the plethora of anarchist, Marxist, anti-Semites of the BBC knew exactly what they were doing in allowing the scumbag to vomit his incitement diatribe. He had form as long as the BBC's arms.
Yeah.
It
wasn't a surprise. Like, he'd only ever spoken about dandelions before now, you know.
Yeah, he'd actually been on singing one of his ditties about digging up Margaret Thatcher. He had form. They knew exactly what he was doing. They probably informed Gettys, who provide them with imaging beforehand, to provide them with pictures, with photos. You know, like if you go onto the website now, you see the typical Gettys photos of this.
This is a picture agency. But okay, you say you had form. You're saying they knew what they were doing. And so what? Okay, so what should happen now to the rappers, to the BBC, to people working there, to BBC chiefs? What should happen?
You see, the BBC are all but the media partners of Hamas in the United Kingdom. What should we do about them? There must have been 500 to 1,000 BBC people there, and there had to be, as your colleague said, one standing there with their fingers on the button to stop the relay.
Of course there were. I mean, genuinely, there was someone whose job it would have been literally to do that.
Julia, I'm speaking as a Jewish atheist, all right? If that's a bit of a... I haven't got truck with everything that's going on in Israel.
No, lots of people don't. I mean, that's the thing, because you're allowed to criticise Israel and the Israeli government and different policies, and there's nothing anti-Semitic about that from anyone doing it.
Heads to roll. They'll get through it. They're the BBC. They seem to believe they're untouchable, and it appears like that, Julia, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think you're right. But the fact I'm amazed they've even admitted they've done something wrong. Even they think we might have gone a bit too far this time. I think they go too far every single day. But there we are. Barry, appreciate your call, and big thanks to Alice as well. Love to hear your thoughts. If you disagree, I mean, I don't choose those calls that are coming up genuinely. I'd love to hear from you if you disagree on that. I'm always happy to hear different views. You completely defend it. Bearing in mind, Sam Armstrong is here, and you were saying, look, you think BBC heads should roll, but you don't think anyone certainly should be criminalised, not even let alone in prison, but should have been criminalised for it.
Yeah, because it's very difficult, and people on Twitter are rightly disagreeing with me on that point. But my view is, I set an extremely high bar for using the criminal law to clamp down on speech. And it's as difficult as it is, the reality is that we have in this country tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions of people who hold, in my view, extreme and unpleasant views. And one of the things about living in this society is I have to allow them to run off their idiotic mouths, in part so I can point out just how stupid and idiotic they are.
There is an element where I'd rather people knew they could say it so we can actually argue with them, and we know who they are. I like to be able to know who they are. 12:35 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to talk to former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards about, those welfare climb downs from Keir Starmer. Third major U-turn. We've got more to come. And has he, just days before his one-year anniversary as Prime Minister, lost all authority? That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:37 is the time. Let's welcome Paul Richards to the show, former Labour Special Advisor. A very, very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining. Although, unlike apparently half of our callers today, I don't have a swimming pool at home. I don't know. Do you have a swimming pool at home?
No, but I do live very near a beach, which is where I'm going next.
Oh, I'm liking your style there. Now I think you might have won, everybody. Paul, look, this should be. I mean, we are literally just approaching July. We're just approaching the 1-year anniversary of the election, landslide victory for Keir Starmer, the Labour Party, on Friday, and him becoming Prime Minister on Saturday. And yet, the Prime Minister's authority seems to have, not waning away, seems to have utterly disappeared. We are looking at his third major U-turn in office on things that he was standing absolutely by and defending at the time. Winter fuel allowance being cut for some 10 million pensioners. There should not be a national public inquiry into rape and grooming gangs. And also we needed to have cuts to disability benefits and personal independence payments. Absolutely stood by all of that. Now, U-turns on all of them, and he's still tomorrow facing the possibility of a major rebellion by 50 to 60 of his own Labour backbench MPs, even after completely cowering and caving in to the 126 total rebels. I mean, is he a Prime Minister that only a year after being elected is actually already on the way out?
I think after 1 year, the scorecard is very good on the international stage. So I think he's led the rearmament of Europe. He's got us 3 good trade deals, which no previous government has managed to do, including with the EU and India and, of course, the USA. He is respected on that world stage from other world leaders. And that, I think, has meant that he's been out of the country more than other prime ministers have been in their first year.
Oh, no, I know. I was a political journalist. No, I'm not. No, I was a political journalist when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. He was off at EU summits every 5 minutes in his first year in office, and his poll ratings were massively high.
So on the second part about the domestic agenda, I think obviously it needs to try harder. And I think the climb down today is a positive thing in the sense that the policy would have put people into poverty, and the Labour MPs have said, no, that's not what we want. And he's listened to that, too late as it happens, but he has listened to it, which means there won't be a big rebellion. So the original question was, his authority. Well, he stamped his authority down on the Parliamentary Labour Party today by saying, look, I've listened to you, here are the changes you want. Now get in the Labour lobbies, which is what will happen.
I'm really, Paul, I'm very confused by this. Okay, so say, my kid, when she was like 7 or 8 years old, and I said, you have to go to bed at 7 p.m. or whatever time it would be. And she said, no, I'm not going to go to bed at 7 p.m. I'm going to have a full-on tantrum. This never happened, by the way. But I want to go to bed at 8 p.m. And then I went, OK, you can go to bed at 7:45. Would that be me as a parent stamping my authority as a parent? Would that be me caving in to a tantruming child?
Well, I'm not sure the analogy stands up because the Labour MPs said, look, we've been listening to our constituencies, we're talking to people who are on the PIP payments who are worried, and we don't think this policy is going to get the objective, which is getting people back to work.
Sorry,
and getting
didn't the Work and Pensions Secretary, didn't anyone at number 10, Keir Starmer's an MP, do they not talk to their constituents about what the impact of the welfare payments would be? Given the fact that people have been raising that for a couple of months now, that wasn't an issue until the weekend when he was facing a massive defeat from his own MPs. Suddenly now he cares what those people think.
No, again, I think that's unfair. I mean, there is all the interviews he's given over the weekend, admitting failings, and they're quite actually refreshingly honest, I think, the sort of masochism strategy he's adopted over the weekend, saying, yep, I got it wrong, I think just shows that he can't treat Labour MPs as lobby fodder. He does need to listen to their expertise and their views, and that's what's happened. So this bill will go forward in a very different way than intended. It was something, I think, cooked up in the Treasury by civil servants. It didn't have a political sound.
Oh, no, OK, now it's got nothing to do with the government. I'm sorry, you say refreshingly honest. This is a man who says he regrets, he deeply regrets saying the phrase, we're going to be becoming an island of strangers over the immigration issue and lack of integration. But he says he regrets saying it, but he hadn't read the speech properly. He hasn't paid attention to concerns over welfare reform because he's been distracted by foreign affairs. I mean, he's not admitting to, he's not being honest, he's admitting he's not up to the job.
I think it is honest, and it's refreshing.
He doesn't read his speeches, and he doesn't pay attention to public policy that his own government is pushing. And you think he's up to the job?
That's not what he's saying, is it, Julia? But if he turned up and said, if he'd said 1 year on, everything is going fine, it's all marvellous, you'd be all over him like a rash, wouldn't you? Because he would be lying. But his honesty, I think, shows that there's an ability for this government to learn from the lessons of the last few weeks.
To cave in. Well, no, they don't learn. They simply give in when there's public pressure. Look, at this time, a year after Tony Blair was elected, at this time, he had a net favourability, bearing in mind there are people who hate him anyway and people who like him, net favourability of plus 34. David Cameron, as Prime Minister of a coalition government, didn't even have a majority, dealing with the aftermath of the economic crisis, the banking crisis. He had net favourability of -3. Keir Starmer, -54.
I think that's a reflection of the very difficult decisions he's had to take in the first year.
What difficult decisions has he taken? He's rode back on all the difficult decisions.
Well, he's had to sort out the economy.
Has he? Oh, is that sorted out now?
He's dealing with the small boats crisis that we talk about every week.
Those gangs are smashed?
Well,
Paul, with all due respect, my lovely, Paul, I've known you a long time. I don't think even you think that anyone believes what you're saying is true.
Well, I think they do, and I think the fact is that we won a council by-election in Stevenage last week, where I was. People are still voting Labour. There are signs that people are going to back the government because they know it's taking long-term decisions.
Have you seen the polls?
That is unpopular in the short term, but for long-term gain.
You know as well as I do. You know as well as I do. Everyone is expecting there'll be another U-turn on those tax pledges about working people in the autumn. We also know there's more than 40 Labour MPs who were concerned that their constituencies are because they've got a lot of rural areas, which they thought, that was their Tory shires, but they've got Labour MPs now. They're planning to water down the inheritance tax rate on farmers. We've seen with winter fuel allowance, the pushback, he caves. The rape gang inquiry, pushback, he caves. Disability benefit, pushback, he caves. He doesn't stand for anything. He doesn't believe in anything. And you know as well as I do, the money that has already been, the money that was supposed to come out of those disability benefit cuts, and it wasn't enough anyway. It didn't touch the sides of what is needed in terms of welfare reform. And yes, I've already tackled a Tory shadow cabinet or shadow member about how they put us into this mess in the first place. But that money's already spent. So we're going to have tax raises to pay for the cave-in to these rebels or spending cuts elsewhere. The truth is that Keir Starmer doesn't believe in anything, doesn't know what he thinks about anything, and he will give in to anyone who pushes him too far. He's not a leader.
Totally disagree with all of that analysis. He is
Which bit was untrue?
He certainly led to the defeat of the Tories in a Labour majority. And he's now pushing through a programme of getting growth in the economy, investing. Look at the way he saved all those steel jobs. He's got ourselves these amazing trade deals that businesses will benefit, will create growth in the economy. And that's how you grow your public services, is by getting growth. Waiting lists are down, interest rates have fallen. There's a lot of
interest rates have got nothing to do with the government. They're Bank of England independent decisions.
But it helps with the growth, and it helps businesses plan, and it gets all those things moving, which will be a long-term mission. This is a 10-year job. It can't happen after 1 year, but it has put down the bedrock, and he has now taken some of those hard decisions to get.
Why is it that so many people seem to be on manoeuvres in the cabinet? I mean, it appears, we're seeing the papers, Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, deputy prime minister, her sources saying her supporters saying they don't think he's going to be in office in even a year's time. We've got, some would say, Wes Streeting, the health secretary, seen by many who aren't Labour Party members as a potential leader, not perhaps by Labour Party members, but very much appealing to a certain constituency with his comments at the weekend over what's been happening over Glastonbury and these sort of anti-Semitic chants on the stage there, and the BBC footage there are basically saying, Israel needs to get its act together and look at its own house in order over West Bank settlements. I thought it was very, very telling, that certain appeal. It does appear an awful lot of Labour backbench MPs and Labour members of the cabinet don't think that Keir Starmer is going to make it the full 5 years.
Well, we'll get a vote tonight, won't we? Which will be a very clear, resounding.
Well, tomorrow. I mean, tomorrow is the welfare vote.
Sorry, Tuesday. That's what I meant. So I'm getting ahead of myself. And
don't wish
you'll
the
see
day away.
We'll see the numbers there in terms of the authority of the Prime Minister and the levels of support that he has. And I suspect it will dwindle away to the usual suspects, the hard left who don't like him anyway. But the majority of Labour MPs will back him. I think he showed decisive action on things like Glastonbury. I mean, they spoke out almost within hours.
Well, actually,
Tim Davey was on the phone, being berated by the Cabinet Minister Lisa Nandy within a few minutes of it happening. And I think, heads will roll over that as well. So that's just a little example.
Can I just say that going back to the welfare, we're going to have an announcement from the welfare. So the Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall, basically announcing this climb down and what they're going to do. The reality is, those benefit reforms didn't touch the size of what was really needed. We're still going to be seeing, even on what they originally did, now watered down even more, the benefits bill climbing exponentially. I mean, over the next few years, when we haven't got the 2.5% growth a year that we were predicted by the Labour Party once they came into office. We've got taxes rising. Pretty much everyone, including the IFS, expect taxes to continue to rise. That will dampen down even more our chances of growth. At the end of the day, Keir Starmer is presiding over a government where, frankly, the numbers do not add up, do they?
Well, your point about the welfare bill is, of course, the most important one, which is the whole system is broken. We're spending more on disability than defence. Yeah. The numbers have gone up by 10
And he's choosing not to fix it.
90s. So you need to have a reform programme.
And he's choosing not to do that. And you think that makes him a strong leader?
Bill being announced later. But, all of that is predicated on getting people back to work. Anyone that can work should work. And we shouldn't have millions of people on benefits who could be working in some way.
But he won't do the reforms to make that happen.
Well, that's the reforms that are being announced today, isn't it? That's what they're going to be voting on tomorrow night.
So in a year's time, when people are back to work...
he won't be there, according to you. But I will eat my hat on your show, by the way, if he's not Prime Minister in 1 year from now. I think there's all this talk about, leadership contests. It's absolute garbage. Maybe there people are briefing and on manoeuvres, but as Tony Blair used to say, there's nothing ignoble about wanting to be Prime Minister. But there is only one Prime Minister and there's no vacancy.
All right, then. Well, you're going to need that hat as you head off to the beach in this weather. Paul Richards, thank you for joining us, former Labour Special Advisor. We're going to take a quick break. 12:49 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about the usual eco-hypocrisy from the millionaires, billionaires, celebrities and A-list who turned up to Jeff Bezos' wedding in Venice. Oh, by the way, don't forget to wash out your yoghurt pots before you recycle them, because they want to all get jets to Venice. We'll talk about that eco-hypocrisy one more time. This is Talk.
There's an altered state there, notwithstanding the slabs that fly in. The climate, everything's changing, poor us, poor the world, save the world. And yet, they're flying in and out from the helipads. It's just in what planet?
It used to be a music festival. It used to be a music festival. And like all things that start down the trajectory of sort of woke leftism, it keeps going and keeps going until reality is a dot on the horizon behind it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Indeed Talk. Thank you very much indeed for your company. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to remind you, by the way, that this Friday marks 1 year since Labour's landslide election victory, and to commemorate the occasion, Talk has put together a 1-hour special looking back at Keir Starmer's first 12 months in Downing Street. 1 year of chaos will air on Friday, this Friday at 9 p.m. Then you'll be able to get it on our YouTube page. Me and all of the other main presenters will feature, and I promise you it's going to be a good watch and a good listen. Right now, though, tell you what a great watch was. Love looking at all the videos and photos of this. That was the wedding of the world's second richest man in the world, Amazon owner Jeff Bezos, to Lauren Sanchez, who, by the way, Lauren, woman to woman, you've played a blinder girl. Well played. But as always, we had the great and the good, the A-listers, the celebrities, the millionaires, and of course the billionaires all turning up. And for once, they weren't lecturing us about how we all need to be more eco and wash our yoghurt pots out and turn the lights off and stop driving our cars, as they flew in on, I kid you not, 96 different private jets. Well, let's talk about this with Chris Morrison. He's the environment editor of the Daily Sceptic. Good afternoon to you, Chris.
Hi, Julia.
I have a funny feeling you don't spend a lot of time being very concerned about effectively celebrity billionaire weddings. Sadly, I think you and I were not on the list, didn't choose not to go to Venice, but this was just another classic example, and we see that with every major event where all these A-listers attend, is that they talk one thing and all their little lectures on social media and all their campaigning, but they act in a completely different way when it comes to their own private lives.
Yes, alas, I was forced to stay in England to enjoy a lovely day, a summer's day. Sorry, a day of climate collapse, as we now know it. You know what they say about hypocrisy? It's the tribute that vice pays to virtue. And the people at this wedding, there was obviously an awful lot of virtue on display, and there was quite a bit of vice. But that's, of course, if you take the view that carbon dioxide is a problem. I mean, we can come to that. The problem is we can't talk about that because, as you were talking earlier, Ofcom means that you'll have to get someone like Jim Dale on to oppose me or something like that.
It's settled. It's a settled issue, climate change, as being caused by man and being a crisis.
Yes, yeah, and the fact that nobody can talk about it for the last 40 years means that most of the people there know absolutely diddly squat about it, and they don't understand that carbon dioxide is a trace gas, that we probably might even need a bit more in it when we see the enormous greening and the de-desertification that's going on at the moment. But leaving that aside, we don't want to get too upset Ofcom too much by talking.
No, feel free. If Ofcom are upset by facts, I've not got an issue with that.
Yes. Well, I mean, you know, when you're dealing with climate, facts are useful, but not necessarily when it's reported in the mainstream media. No, we had all these people, these celebrities. I looked at some of the guest lists. We had DiCaprio, the actor.
Yeah.
This is a chap who flew 9 years ago. He flew 8,000 miles to pick up an award. Yeah. An award, would you believe, for an environment award.
It's just wonderful, isn't it? I mean, it's so blatant. I mean, I often say this, but it's like, do they know we can see them?
Yes, I know. It's it's very much the rant of the sinner of the ages. Oh Lord, make me holy, but not just yet. We had Bill Gates is another one who has spent a fortune, has got a private plane, justifies it because of his work needs to be sent around the world, and justifies it because he does a bit of carbon capture. Well, as I say, the CO2 that we're pushing out into the atmosphere with all those lovely private jets is actually doing a much better job of greening the planet than some silly carbon capture scheme that he.
But the key thing about this is, again, everyone says, this is the equivalent, 96 private jets, equivalent to 27,300 cars, daily emissions. I don't care. I think cars are a great thing. Cars are a lot cleaner than they used to be, and that's a really good thing. Indeed, they're working on making aviation fuel a lot cleaner than it used to be, and planes that's also a really good thing. But fundamentally, the ability to travel, whether it's, to your place of work or to go and visit family or to go to a billionaire friend's wedding on the other side of the world, that's a good thing. We used to enjoy the fact that human beings had taken control over our lives in that way, and now it's supposed to be terribly bad and, sackcloth and ashes and self-flagellation. And it is a very, very, very strange thing. But the people who most preach this are the people who basically carry on with their own lives. And what they mean is, again, these people are all signed up to all these projects where, people shouldn't be allowed to drive in their own cities or to travel a long way or get more than, say, one return flight on a holiday a year, and they want to wag their fingers at everyone. But what they think is that I'll be able to buy my own way out of that because I'm rich and I'm privileged, and what I do is different from what us mortals, us plebs do.
It's a political narrative, of course. It's got nothing to do with science. And in fact, they gave up talking about the science 40 years ago. And as I say, put on people like Jim Dale to discuss it. So they've given up themselves. It's a political narrative. It's if you control hydrocarbons, as you say, you can control more or less what humans do. There's a neo-Malthusian narrative behind it. They think there's just too many people on the Earth.
They do.
That can be, discussed either way. The Earth has managed to sort of survive, even with 8 billion people, because of the use of hydrocarbons. Because the hydrocarbons provide this wonderful fertilizer that means that we can feed the Earth. We can, as you say, travel where we wish. They wished, if you like, to control. It's an elitist control mechanism. As I say, designed really. Gates talks about, flew by private plane. In his book that was given huge publicity on the BBC, I think he read it out for, Book of the Week. He talks about eating less meat. And they talk about being carbon neutral, and John Kerry, who's that sort of bloating Biden climate bluffer, has got his own family jet, and they talk about how they need to get around.
They're just complete hypocrites. Meanwhile, of course, the world is on fire, and we've got a heat wave, and apparently it's all terrible, and we're all being told, we'll barely make it through the day.
It's 30 degrees. It's appalling. It's truly appalling. I don't know how I'm going to survive.
I'm very lucky. I'm sitting in aircon now. We've had 2 callers who've got swimming pools at home, and one who's off to the seaside. Very, very nice. It's not very pleasant in a lot of our homes because they're not designed for the heat. Maybe we have to be a bit more careful about that. But I think the solution most people would love is aircon. Air conditioning would be the solution to all of our problems, would it not? But, run by fossil fuels. Chris Morrison, I wish we had along with you. Always so good to get you on. Environment editor at the Daily Sceptic. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, just your final word on that.
Am I alone in finding this Bezos wedding a bit tacky? I just think
it's very tacky.
Just going to buying up a city that you've got nothing to do with, that's Venice.
It's not like his wife was born there.
No,
maybe her breasts are from there. I don't know.
It's just so tacky. The Kardashians there. This is what Americans have no class. This is my final thought.
I'm ashamed of myself. I feel dirty, but I did like looking at the pictures. But I say, Lauren Sanchez, you played a blinder girl. You got the ring on the finger. If you like to put a ring on it, I'm saying she got the ring on the finger from the billionaire. I would love to read that prenup, but I don't care how bad that prenup is. The lady's going to walk away rich. Also, he definitely has a physical type, doesn't he?
He does.
Definitely has a physical type. Some slightly more pneumatic than others. But there you are, girls. Just say, in college.